IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Monday, and that means RTCF time. We're going to have a scheduling change when we get to the season where Shaun and I are going to be doing RTCF through the season. In the past, we have kind of stopped doing RTCF during the season, but Shaun and I were like, you know what? Let's keep this thing rolling through the season. There's a lot of cool things we can do with this during the season. So we are actually going to keep our TCF rolling through the season. It will not be on Monday, but we will have it later in the week. I'm excited about that. I know Shaun and I had a conversation about it last week, figured it out. I'm excited about it. I know he's excited about it because, this is going to be a fun season, Shaun, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. RTCF, for those who don't know, R stands for recruiting, T stands for a team topic, a Notre Dame team topic, and then CF stands for a college football topic. So recruiting-wise today, we're going to kind of talk about the state of recruiting at the tight end position, past, present, future. We're going to then, during our team topic, Shaun brought this topic up to me a couple weeks ago, and we've been waiting to get to it. And it was a great idea, a great topic, and it's what makes you think that this team is going to be different than what we've seen in the past? Meaning, we've seen Notre Dame make runs to the semifinals or the championship game in the last 15 years. In 2012, they did it. In 2018, they did it. In 2020, they did it. In every single season that followed, Notre Dame took a step back to some degree. Record didn't always reflect it, but the team was never as good the following year. Will this team be any different? That's question number one. And then if it is different, what makes you think it'll be different? And so we're going to dive into that today. And then the third topic is going to look at, we're going to break down who we think, Shaun and I think, are the top title contenders in each conference. Not conference championship title contenders, but the teams that we think in each league have the best shot or the legitimate shot. Who are kind of the tier one teams of the 2025 season, not tier one overall, big picture. We've talked about that, but the teams that we think, if everything goes right, at the very least, if everything goes right, that this team could win a championship. Because there's a lot of teams, Shaun, that even if everything goes right, they're not winning a championship. But we're going to break down the teams that we think do have that opportunity, and that'll be part 3 of the show. But Shaun, I'm ready to go on today, man. I know it's been a couple weeks we've done RTCF. Got some exciting topics ready to go this week, and then of course fall camp starts this week. Man, it's on us. It got on us real quick, man. But I'm fired up and ready for the season to get started.
Best part of the year, right? Other than when it's getting close to the playoffs, probably. I just love the anticipation. Like, fans can start to feel it. You have the countdowns that started a month ago, 75 days, 74 days, and now we're right here on the cusp of being like a month out. And you can't be even more excited with camp starting on Thursday. It's time to ratchet things up, even for us. Start talking about things a little bit deeper, more in depth. And so that's what makes it more exciting.
Couple Notre Dame topics to just get out of the way here to begin with. Number one, Notre Dame did release earlier today that they have they don't have a new game to the 2027 schedule. That game was already they were already slated to play Wake Forest. It's one of 7 games that Notre Dame has slated that season. They have 4 ACC games. They have Clemson, Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, and who's the 4th team that year? Georgia Tech. And then there's 2 Big Ten teams in the schedule, Purdue and Michigan State, and then, of course, an American Conference team on the schedule, Navy. But the one game prior to today that we didn't know what the day was going to be is the Wake Forest game. And that today it was announced that game is going to be played on October 9th, and it will be part of the Duke's Mayo Classic, which is a regular season game, but it's a neutral site game. And Notre Dame will play that game inside Bank of America Stadium, which is the home of the Carolina Panthers. It will be the second time that Notre Dame has played inside that stadium. First time was the ACC title game back in 2020. And looking at it also, Shaun, people forget that year Notre Dame was supposed to play at Bank of America Stadium against Wake Forest in that 2020 season. The COVID fiasco kind of blew that up. Then it was going to get played at Notre Dame. And then, of course, Notre Dame had an outbreak. They had to cancel that week. Then Wake, they rescheduled for later. Then Wake had an outbreak at that time, and they did end up not playing the game. So this will be the first regular season game that Notre Dame has played at Bank of America Stadium. So that was obviously talked about today. And then the other bit of news, the Maxwell Award watch list came out today. Jeremiah Love was on it, so he is on the Maxwell Award watch list. You don't have to be on the watch list to win it, but he obviously is Notre Dame's best candidate. So that's a little bit of news, Shaun. Before we dive into the first topic, we're going to kick things off with recruiting today. We started doing these kind of state of the program recruiting breakdowns a while ago, and we're going to kick back up on those. And tight end is interesting because when we started this, Shaun, we were looking at tight end as a major question mark when we first started doing the recruiting, state of the recruiting things. Now we fast forward, we wait until July 28th to do the show, and the vibe is very, very different. So let's start talking about the state of tight end recruiting, because this is an important position, I think more so than for most teams, Shaun, because this is a position that is of such value for Notre Dame. There's a lot of teams that can win without having great tight end play. I think it's a lot harder for Notre Dame to truly be a championship team without big-time tight end play. And so we're going to talk about just kind of the past, present, and future of tight end recruiting, because I'll make the case. I'll just go out and say it. I don't know that tight end recruiting going back to 2020, 2021, post-2020, so like they got Michael Mayer in 2020. I don't know if tight end recruiting has been as consistently good as it needed to be for a program like Notre Dame. And that's where I want to begin today, Shaun, because you look at 2021, they got Kane Barong and Mitchell Evans. Now, Mitchell Evans turned out to be a pretty good player. Kane Barong did not pan out at Notre Dame. You get Eli Raritan in 2022, very strong pickup, but obviously he's had some injury history. 2023, Cooper Flanagan's a good football player. I would not call him an elite football player. 2024, Jack Larson, good football player. Would not call him an elite football player. 2025, I think they got a borderline elite tight end, but more of a throwback type tight end. And then you come into 2026 recruiting cycle and you're like, okay, what's it going to be? And there were some misses. There were some concerns about, okay, they kind of got into tight end recruiting late, at least from a pushing for things standpoint. We weren't sure if they were going to get a top guy. What would it look like? And 2 months ago, neither Ian Premer nor Preston Frizel would have been on my predicted class list. And then here we are with that. So let's talk about the past, Shaun, because I do think it's fair to say it hasn't quite been consistently good enough, which is why we're in a situation right now where you look at the tight end position and you cross your fingers and say, I really hope that Eli Raritan doesn't get hurt. And then it's why they had to go to the portal to get a tight end this season, because I don't think it's been consistently good enough prior to Mike Denbrock coming back, and I think kind of hopefully getting things back on track.
It's really interesting when you talk about the tight end position, because we were just talking about this on our last show, and we were talking about how they ended up with Ian Premer in the class. And it just had you thinking about, like you said, this process has been very meticulous, but it has been kind of like line upon line. Like they've taken their time. I don't know, big story, whether or not they meant to take their time. I highly doubt that that's the way they wanted to approach it. But the spring was very important because something happened where they began to turn things around with tight end recruiting. And like you said, when you go back and look at the history and you go back and look at the guys in the room, you really don't see guys that are like the Michael Mayer types, like day one, elite, number one tight end. But you do see some guys that are really good and solid. So if you're going to build a tight end room like that, where you have different types of guys with variety, like you talk about, they get Flanagan last year. He comes in more of a throwback type. I mean, this is a two-way kid. He's good at defensive end. He can play tight end. So just the fact that he's going to be in the tight end room, you feel comfortable that he's a really good athlete and that he can grow. And because of his physicality, he can make an impact and play for you at some point during his freshman year. Now you move forward and you end up with the combination that they ended up with Preston Frizel and Ian Premer. And then this is the thing about it. You know, there was another guy that just committed to another school, Texas A&M, they're going to be facing at home this year, that if one of the other guys fell through, they're probably going to end up with that guy in the class. And, you know, he might not be equal as far as pass catching and running ability as Ian Premer and Preston Frizel. But I'm telling you something, man, that would have been a solid pickup. So you really,
you liked him more than I did.
see, I used the word solid.
For sure.
It would have been a solid pickup. There were some guys that they didn't get that committed other places earlier that probably been higher on the list than him. Speaking of Evan Jacobson, but no, I just think what they did in a small amount of time, how they were able to turn things around in tight end recruiting, I think speaks well, and I think it speaks to there are a lot of different cooks when it comes to recruiting as a collaborative effort, but the direction of the recruitment and what they're looking for and the type of guys they're needing to get in the offense. I think moving forward, I think the 26 class, I'm interested in hearing how you think the 26 class now impacts the 27 class and the guys, because I'm sure we'll get to those young men in a few minutes.
Like when I look at tight end recruiting at a place like Notre Dame, Shaun, it's like there's some positions where it's like, look, you just need a dude every 3-4 years. And then other than that, you get pretty good football players. You don't necessarily need studs. It's nice to have, what Notre Dame has done at running back recruiting the last few years under Dylan McCullough has been pretty ridiculous. And I don't think you need that to win a title. I think it makes it easier, but you don't need it as long as you're recruiting at other positions that way. And I think tight end is a position where the frustration that I have had, and part of it's just been a lack of continuity. I mean, if you look at it, 3 different tight end coaches were responsible for building the current depth chart. When you look at, obviously, Mike Denbrock bringing in James Flanagan and Ty Washington, you look at what Jared Parker did with Jack Larson, and I believe he was also actually really just primarily Jack Larson, because Cooper Flanagan was already in the class, I believe, when he was hired. And then, obviously, with the impact John McNulty had with Cooper Flanagan and Eli Raridan, Mitchell Evans, and Kane and Chip Long recruited Kane Barong. Actually, 4 tight end coaches were responsible for the 21 to 25 period, but it's just the 3 that were responsible for building the current depth chart. And when I look at tight end recruiting, you should at least get a dude every other year at worst. And I would argue you kind of need a guy that either is a present dude or a guy that's got dude upside in every class. I mean, you look at Tommy Tremble, when they got a commitment from Tommy Tremble, I wasn't sitting here trying to tell everybody, hey, guys, this is going to be a next star tight end. He's going to be a high NFL draft pick. No doubt about it. It was, hey, I think he has the tools that if he can pan out, he might have a shot to become an impact player. And I think Tommy Tremble's career would have been even better had he not been blocked by a guy as good as Michael Mayer, who just was I don't like to use this word, especially at tight end. I don't like to overuse certain words like elite and all this, but he was a generational talent for most programs. And you look at it and say, Brock Wright's another example. Brock Wright's career would have looked very different if it wasn't blocked by Cole Kmet and Michael Mayer. Those guys are all playing the NFL right now. And Brock Wright's an important part of the Detroit Lions football team. Tommy Tremble just signed a big extension with the Panthers, I believe, this offseason. And the thing that's been kind of frustrating is we haven't seen, in my opinion, that same type of players. They've signed good players. Jack Larson's a good football player. Cooper Flanagan's a good football player. But that should not be a back-to-back haul for Notre Dame, in my opinion. And then Eli Raridan was a very talented player, but he was a guy that was going to need time. He was a bit raw. And then, of course, the knee injury, which you can't fault the coaching staff for a kid getting hurt after he signs. I mean, I'm not going to fault them for that. But I felt like this prior staff, didn't pursue or wasn't able to land some of the higher level prospects on the board. I think to a degree, some of it was bad luck. There were some years where there just wasn't like the Jack Larson class. There weren't a lot of great national tight ends. And I don't know that they thought they could get the couple guys that were. Jack's a very good football player. None of these guys are bad football players by any stretch. But I just felt like it wasn't quite up to what you expect from Notre Dame when you're talking about, 2017, you go out and get Cole Kmet and Brock Wright in the same class. And then 2018, you go out and get Tommy Tremble. I just felt like it was one of those classes where one of these stretches where you just didn't feel like they were quite getting the potential talent they could have. I mean, again, Cole Kmet and Brock Wright in one class, The next year, you go out and get George Takis and Tommy Tremble. Then the next year in 2019, you decide to pass on the position outright. It was like, okay, it's an interesting strategy. That was part of Kelly's stretch where your only skill players in that class were you got Kyron Williams, Cam Hart, Kendall Abdul-Rahman, and a quarterback, Brennan Clark. Just kind of like wish you could go back and just forget that part of Notre Dame's recruiting, but they're past that now. But then the next year you go out and you get Michael Mayer and Kevin Bauman, two really good football players. And I just feel like you're not having the same consistency, haven't had the same consistency, which put them in a position, Shaun, where they had to get an Ian Premer type of kid in this class. It's not like, well, that's a luxury to have. Like, they needed it. And for a while we were uncertain if they were going to get that kind of guy. And it looked like it was going to be a Preston Frizzell, Evan Jacobson class, which I like Preston Frizzell's upside, but he's more Tommy Tremble than he is Michael Mayer. And, Evan Jacobson, what's he going to be? Is he going to be a Mitchell Evans type of surprise 3-star breakout? I grade him as a 3-star. I know others rate him higher. I just don't see it on film. Or is he going to be just sort of a rotational guy? We don't know the answer to that, but they're both low floor, higher ceiling-ish guys. When you're able to get a guy like Tommy Tremble, when you're able to get a guy like Ian Premer, however, that's that high floor, high ceiling type of player that you followed up a high floor, high ceiling player back to back. This is the first time that, in my opinion, that Notre Dame has really signed that type of player in back to back classes since probably 17, 18. I mean, would you? Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's you probably even go back further than that, but we haven't seen them where they've signed, in my opinion, back-to-back top 100 players in 2 straight years since, you got Michael Mayer in 20, in 2021, you got Eli and Holden, right? In 2021, no, you got Mitchell Evans and Kane Barong. They weren't top 21 players. In 2022, you got Holden Stace and Eli Raridan. Holden was a top 100 player, or Eli was a top 100 player, in my opinion. And then 2023, you went out and got Cooper Flanagan, who's a nice, solid top 150 to top 200 player. So it's been a while since you've landed back-to-back top 100 players. And I think as you transition into the present, and then we'll get into what it means for the future, you then ask yourself, like, okay, is that because this is what Mike Denbrock was doing at receiver when he left. And here's where I think makes Mike Denbrock a smart coach. He was the OC at Notre Dame back in 15 and 16 as well. 14, 15, and 16. And he understood it's going to be hard for me to coach and recruit this position the way that you need to by myself. And he went out and hired, I think his name was Ryan Mahaffey, who I've talked about before, who has since then has spent time as an offensive coordinator at his alma mater of Northern Illinois. He has he spent time coaching in the National Football League. He was with the Packers for a minute. He's actually still with the Packers. He's currently the wide receivers coach of the Packers. So good talent recognition by Mike Denbrock, and he trusted Ryan Mahaffey to do some things. But then obviously Mike Denbrock went out and got the 2015, 2016 classes that you had Equinemi St. Brown, Kevin Stefferson, C.J. Sanders, Jalen Guyton, Miles Boykin, Chase Claypool, Javon McKinley, and did I say C.J. Sanders yet? Jalen Guyton. I mean, it was back-to-back loaded classes. And then he leaves, and receiver recruiting kind of, goes that way. Now he comes back, and he says, look, I'm going to need somebody that I trust, somebody that I know can coach and recruit to help me out. So what does he do? He brings Harris Biven with him from LSU, who helped him do that there. And now all of a sudden you're hearing Harris Biven's name mentioned all the time by recruits about, hey, Harris Biven does a great job, and we see him working with tight ends there in practice. And I think that's a smart football coach. Hey, look, I'm going to need somebody I trust that when I'm not there, he can work with the tight ends and that somebody can help me on the recruiting trail. And then, of course, Mike Denbrock's also a great individual recruiter. But you wondered, like, will he have that same kind of, like golden touch that he had at receiver recruiting? I don't know that we knew the answer to that because James Flanagan was already committed when Mike Denbrock got here. Did a great job of keeping him in the class, obviously. I shouldn't say great job because I don't know that you were going to not get James Flanagan at Notre Dame. But, okay, but could you build on it? And you go to the process, and it was a bit of a winding road, but you say, man, first full class is Ian Premer and Preston Frizzell. Like, all right, this is what Mike Denbrock does. And I think this 25 and 26 classes, Shaun, has restocked the tight end position to where maybe it's not there now, but in the very near future, you expect the tight end room to look like it did in the past, where you're talking about you're 3 deep at high NFL caliber players. And I don't think that that's what you can say about the current tight end room, but I think that's going to change very quickly as you get into this room being dominated by the James Flanagans, the Ian Premers, and the Preston Frizells.
And you're talking about the reality of the room versus, what the room was supposed to be, right? You talked about, I remember going to the first fall camp with Holden Stays and Eli Raritan, and they were doing all types of formations with both of those young men being spread out with the inside guys being the wide receivers. They were using them in different ways, play action down in the red zone specifically. So their vision for how great those two guys would be as a combination, of course, you include injury, transfers, and now we don't see that as part of the reality of the tight end room. So now, you start to rebuild what that reality can be, because there are certain things that were unforeseen that kind of derailed that. And so now with that, you get back to what's taking place, the current class they have, and 26 to 2 guys that they have. I think what is being done, and you mentioned Harris Biven and Ryan Mahaffey, when you mentioned his name, I had to go back. He was there at the same time as the Packers head coach. Like, they were all there around the same time. So it makes sense. And now you understand why the Packers have one of the best developmental wide receiver rooms in the NFL. They draft, they evaluate, they draft, and they develop, and they have guys for the past 5 years that immediately make an impact. And so I think for the first time this year, they drafted a wide receiver in the first round for the first time.
Aaron Rodgers is probably like taking stuff, throwing it at the television when he saw that too. Like, are you freaking kidding me?
So now, what that lets me know, with all that being said, forget the coach on the field calling plays. As a coach, and you can speak to this, having the wisdom to have other brilliant people around you, so you don't necessarily have to be the smartest guy in the room all the time, and being able to identify those type of people and say, hey, why don't you come along with me, because I'm going to be able or need to trust you to be able to do the leg work and some other things to be able to get things to where they need to be. I think he's a great evaluator of people. More than players. I think Mike Denbrock is one of the best evaluators of people, being able to get the right people around him to help assist him in what he wants to establish. And in doing so, I think that helped, especially with Ian Premer. I think that really helped having a Harris Biven, alone. I think it also helped. Evan Jacobson mentioned Harris Biven, even though he ended up at Texas A&M. So it just goes to your point of what has been collaborative as far as building this tight end room or this tight end class in 26 and moving forward. But I think it also speaks to the patience that Mike Denbrock is showing, that he has the direction. He knows where he wants to go with each piece of this offense. And the expectation is to be a top 5 offense, to be able to match what Notre Dame is doing on the defensive side. Tight end is always going to have to, these guys are going to have to block. You've said this for a long time. If you can just compete your tail off at tight end, you can block.
Right.
You can block.
You at least be quality.
Yeah.
When Mitchell Evans struggled last year blocking, it was not because he couldn't physically handle the guy across from him.
Yeah.
It's because he just didn't seem to care about blocking that week.
Well, you said it, I didn't, but I agree with you.
I'll say
it. So I think with that being said, I do believe that this 26 class in a couple of years could be the bookend, or what could be 3 consecutive classes of, we got a dude and then we got some complementary guys in the class as well. They might not end up getting 2 in every class. They might just have 1 in a class moving forward. But that's going to come because they have set the tone. And injuries always play a part. That was why tight end was one of those biggest questions you could ask about this team, because of injuries and health. Like what's going to be there in the long run? And this tight end room has suffered, through attrition, a lot of injuries, say over the last 4 to 5 years. That has kind of stolen away the promise that we thought at the time these young men committed and got to Notre Dame.
Including Mitchell Evans this past season.
Absolutely.
Like, we don't know what Mitchell Evans would have looked like this past season if he wasn't coming off a torn ACL late in the 2023 season. We don't know Eli Raridon didn't practice a whole lot last spring. Where was he going to be? So I think that's a great observation, Shaun, too, also, is that, and you've had, Holden State's leaving. What does the tight end room look like this year if Holden State doesn't transfer? He probably should have stayed. When you look at what's happened for him at Tennessee and Indiana, it's another testament to, like, hey, guys, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. I believe Holden State's caught more balls at Notre Dame than he did as a rotation guy than he did at Tennessee last year, where he was supposed to be the guy. I could be wrong on that, but I thought he had more. Yeah, he had same number of catches, but he had 45 more yards in 2 less games and 3 more touchdowns in his year at Notre Dame splitting carries. Or splitting touch snaps. So grass isn't always greener on the other side. Hopefully he has a breakout year in Indiana, but who knows how he might have evolved and broken out. But so, the portal has had a minimal impact, but it's still a pretty important, it's still a talented loss to have.
And on top of what you just said, I think that goes a long way to being able, as a player and as a coach, to properly convey to young men, now more than ever, not just what is the present, but what is the hope of the future in this program, in this room. And I think Holden State's got caught in between, Brian. I think he kind of got caught in between. Mike Denbrock couldn't come in and immediately do what he wants to do, because he had to deal with, what he had and kind of construct an offense based upon the pieces that he had. On top of the fact, and I know a lot of people, even now, with the quarterback situation, are sitting there saying, yeah, is Marcus Freeman going to allow it to happen? Look, you win football games the way your team shows you that you can win football games. Mm-hmm. I think every coach would love to light up the scoreboard, have a Heisman quarterback, top first round wide receivers, and a great running back. Every head coach would love to have that talent. Everybody would love to go through that sweet spot that Nick Saban went through when he had some of everything offensively. However, most coaches don't have that, and they have to decide what's best for this team. I think Marcus Freeman now, along with Mike Denbrock, they're going to find other ways to win football games. And it's another topic we're probably going to get into next week. Like, what is going to be that sweet spot for Notre Dame? Because the sweet spot for Notre Dame for so long in the passing game was the tight end position. Mm-hmm. The tight end position for Notre Dame was the sweet spot for a long time. So with this recruiting, them getting back on track with recruiting, starting to get dudes or elite guys, top 100 guys on a consistent basis, is that going to shift Notre Dame into a new era offensively? The run game will always be foundational. The offensive line will always be foundational for Marcus Freeman. He's been consistent in saying that. But the building blocks, or the next level or next floors per se, as you continue to build the offense moving forward, what is it going to look like, right? Will we ever see another Michael Mayer that's going to have 50, 60 catches at tight end? If the talent dictates that, I'm sure the coaches are smart enough to say, hey, we got to get the ball to this guy, 5, 6 times a game. So
how many catches did Mitchell Evans led the team this year in catches? I keep hearing these things like, they didn't target tight end enough. And I'm like, their leading pass catcher was a tight end. Well, he only caught 43 passes. Well, that's because the offense didn't throw a whole lot, but their leading pass catcher was a tight end. And, I mean, tight ends, you look at the 15, 16 tight ends this year caught 60 passes this year in 16 games, especially, and when you consider like a lot of that room wasn't healthy, it's like, okay, like he's going to throw the tight end if the need is there. Mason Taylor, for example, at LSU was a very important part of that offense. But being an important part of the offense doesn't mean you're going to be the leading target guy, especially when you have Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas on your roster. And so there was value last year. I mean, we saw that. What was the first deep shot they took in the semifinal game against Penn State? Who did it go to? Went to Mitchell Evans on a wheel route. I mean, that was obviously a big part of the offense. But the tight end play has to get better, in my opinion. I don't think what happened last year as far as the tight ends not being as impactful as they've been is, number one, we still have Michael Mayer fresh in our mind, who was one of the 5 best tight ends of my lifetime at Notre Dame. And I say 5 just to be broad. I mean, he could be 1, he could be 2. I'm just saying, like, in my 47 years, Michael Mayer is one of the 5 best to ever do it at Notre Dame. And in an almost 50-year span, if you're one of the 5 best to do something at Notre Dame, you're pretty good. When you do it at that position, then you're really, really good. So we still have a little bit of that. It's like if the leading receiver for LSU has 70 catches for 1,000 yards this year, like, that's all right. It's a good season. Why? Because you're still thinking of what Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson have done. It's going to be an important part of the offense. But I think that also what needs to happen is I think the tight end room needs to play better, and that speaks to what I'm talking about. Like somebody in the chat was like, hey, how can you say it hasn't been consistent enough when a lot of those guys got on the field early? Well, what does that mean? Getting on the field early simply talks to the need at the position. I would argue if the talent was as good as it should have been, those guys wouldn't be getting on the field as early as they did. And what did they do? Most of them got on the field as blockers. Cooper Flanagan got on the field as a blocker. Eli Rattner got on the field as a blocker. Mitchell Evans got on the field as a blocker. That's a byproduct of an offensive coordinator that likes to run a lot of 12 personnel, doesn't have great depth than it does their recruiting at this high level. And so I'm also not saying that the talent stunk, but at Notre Dame, the standard for tight end recruiting should be that you're bringing in elite players almost every year. And by elite players, it doesn't have to be a guy that's currently elite. As I said, it can be a Tommy Tremble type. It can be a Tyler Eifert type. It just has to be more consistent. Why is the tight end room right now a question mark for most of us? If the recruiting was so good, then why was it a question? Why is it silly question mark? Is it just because Cooper Flanagan and his 7 career catches is out? 5 career catches is out? I don't think that's the primary reason. In the past, you could lose Michael Mayer and Ian and Tommy Tremble, and you're turning to Brock Wright. It's a different animal now. And I think that's an area where you've got to look and say they've got to do a better job of consistently landing top-level talent. Just like we talk about the offensive line, just like we talk about needs to happen at quarterback, just like we now expect Mike Mickens to do at corner, and tight end has to be there. It's been good. It hasn't been good enough. And that's that. Now we're going to find out moving forward, can Mike Denbrock be more consistent? Because when I look at the recruiting from Mike Denbrock and Harris Bivin, it's really just one class. I'm not trying to throw shade at him. Yes, you were responsible for the 2025 class, but James Flanagan was already committed to you when you got here, and it's James Flanagan, father of Jim Flanagan, Notre Dame grad, Notre Dame player, that he goes to a school in Wisconsin called Notre Dame. Guys, this, it didn't take the world's greatest recruiter to get James Flanagan to Notre Dame. Strike step one, year one, home run. But what can you do in year 2? And that's kind of where we want to wrap up, Shaun. And that's, what I'm kind of excited about, because I think the smart thing that they did and the wise thing they did, because one of the mistakes you can make as a coach is when you are still working on putting together your current class, that you can fall behind. When you don't have commitments, you can fall behind in next year's class. And what I think this staff has done a good job of with Mike Denbrock, Harris Biven, and the recruiting staff is they did a really good job of evaluating, offering, and starting the relationship with a lot of really good 2027 tight ends, even before they had anybody committed in the 2026 class, which is why you had so many offered players on campus for the Irish Invasion. They didn't call them a week before, like May 30th, and like, hey, man, you want to come to Irish Invasion next week? Cool. We'll see, let's do it. This process has been building, and when you look at the tight end board, I don't know who they're going to get in 2027, but when you look at Luke Brewer from Iowa, Jack Brown from Missouri, Seneca Driver from Kentucky, Zach Ferris from Nevada, Grant Haviland's a really athletic kid from Georgia, Titus Hawk is a big old joker from Oklahoma, and then Brock Williams from down the street in Illinois, that's a really good start to the class. You basically need one of them, and I would pursue two just to kind of restock the depth chart, but you just at least one of them. You get one of those guys, now we're talking about, or if there's another tight end of their caliber that gets added to the board later, but that caliber player needs to be added to the class to where we now say, okay, Mike Denbrock's going to do at tight end what he was doing at receiver when he was here last time, which is stacking classes back to back to back. And that's a big part of it.
And I think what you said, you hit it right on the nail, or hit the nail right on the head. I actually like the board for 27 better than I like the 26 board. There were a couple of guys that I thought, oh, these are must-get guys. But I get to see, I love Seneca Driver. Seeing him in person, the kid can run. He's big. I think his body can fill out. You talked about the other kids that you mentioned, especially Brock Williams. There's some guys that you can say, man, I wouldn't be mad if that ended up being the guy they get. There's like 3 or 4 kids on that list out of those guys that you mentioned that if that was the guy they ended up with, you would be fine. You would be fine.
Thrilled.
Thrilled, yeah. And it was probably Ian Primer and like one other guy in the 26 board that you were like.
Yeah, because the top guys, you really didn't. I mean, early on, you knew you weren't getting Caden Prothrow. You knew you weren't going to get, what's the kid, the kid from Illinois, Max Suter, was never really interested in Notre Dame, just never really had that interest. You knew you weren't going to get, you tried to get Matt Ludwig. I don't know he's quite on Ian Primer's level, but there's some really good tight ends in the class. But Ian Primer was always at the top of the list. Brock Harris is another guy that's a pretty good player that early on that Notre Dame didn't really get good traction of. There just wasn't that kind of connection with some of those guys in this class. And there's some other kids they could have got. They could have got Isaac Jensen if they wanted him. They could have got Gavin Mueller if they wanted him. And they just passed on those guys because they were shooting for sort of higher level players. Kendra Harrison, I don't know if I mentioned him or not. And like, what I also like too, Shaun, is sometimes what we've seen in the past, when you look at the staff, they would kind of take the easy wins early. And there's a couple players that Notre Dame could have landed early if they wanted them. I think if they'd have made a hard push early, J.C. Anderson's in this class. Now, I know J.C. Anderson's ranked high, but with all due respect, he's not as good as the guys they got. I don't think him and Evan Jacobson are two guys that I've always felt their ranking is higher than what I see on film. And nice player, but I didn't think they ran well enough for what Notre Dame needs at the position. You go from that potential combination to Preston Freisel and Ian Primer, like that's the kind of athlete you need at Notre Dame. Both of those guys is the kind of athlete you need at Notre Dame. And one thing I like is they did not panic the way that we've seen Notre Dame panic in the past, where, okay, we can get this guy. We know we can get this guy. Let's just go and get him, and then we can try for somebody better. They were patient. They're like, look, we need impact players. We need impact players in this class. And they were willing to wait for the right players to come along. And I think that shows me a strategy that's going to be geared towards being more successful than let's just kind of load up early on guys. If we're not going to get our top guys early like they did in 2017 where they got Cole Kmet, Brock Wright real early, let's be honest, they've panicked. and they've taken some guys that are good players, but maybe not the high-level players like you should be going after, in my opinion. And I think that's a good sign. So I want to speak some here real quick, too. With all due respect, the history of a position does not have anything to do with the current coaching staff. This is a point being made in the chat by somebody talking about, well, trying to defend tight end recruiting coming into this year. And I think where you're misguided in the comment he said was, with the history tight end at Notre Dame, you tend to give that position more of a leash. I think that's a very misguided statement. It's we don't like when that's done in the reverse. When people say, well, I don't know if Marcus Freeman can do A, B, C, or D, and you ask why, and you're like, well, Brian Kelly didn't do it, and Bob Diaco didn't do it, and Charlie Weiss didn't do it, and Ty Willingham didn't do it. Well, what does that have to do with Marcus Freeman? The reverse is true as well. Just because somebody else had success coaching this position, like I would hear this during the Jeff Quinn era. But O-line's going to be fine, okay? Yeah, but well, look what Harry did. Yeah, but this ain't Harry. This is somebody different. And you have to evaluate the people that are there now. And just because tight end was strong in the past doesn't mean the people that recruited the position in the previous years were doing the job that they were needed to do. You say, well, Mitchell Evans is a good player. Yeah, he was a good player, but when you're at Notre Dame, you should be able to get better than that. You should, especially more consistently. And that's the thing that we did not see from Notre Dame in recent years at tight end recruiting that I do think we saw in 2026. I mean, again, this is the kind of, okay, that's the standard of tight end recruiting at Notre Dame. You got an elite player in Ian Premer, who right now is one of the 2 or 3 best tight ends in the country. And that's my opinion, Shaun. He's been my guy from like the beginning of recruiting tight ends. You and I have talked about this. Like from day one, I was like, you got to watch this Ian Premer kid from, actually I called him Premer at the time, but then I was corrected. It's Premer. So you got to watch this Ian Premer kid from Kansas. Like, this guy's a dude. And then you pop in the film and you're like, okay, yeah, agreement was there. We were on the same page on that one. Like, but it's not just us. He's the number 26 player in the country by the Rivals on 3. He's 44th by 247. His lowest ranking is 60th by ESPN. But then you compliment him with a kid like Preston Frizzell, who right now maybe isn't, that type of player, and he's got to get stronger and fill out and all this kind of stuff. But the upside is tremendous, Shaun. I mean, he's got 4.5-star upside grade. And I think that's the kind of compliment where in the past, maybe there are some years where Preston Frizzell might be your number one. Like, to me, he's a Mitchell Evans type of guy. Like, maybe he pans out. He's got some tools, but we'll see. And to a degree, Mitchell Evans panned out. I think Mitchell Evans would have panned out even more if it wasn't for the injuries. But you look at it, because he had multiple injuries. Because remember, he had the ankle injury going into the previous season. He missed all of spring before the 2024 or 2023 season. Finally got healthy. Didn't start the season super healthy. That's why he caught fire late and then gets hurt again. So injuries were a recurring problem. That's not something that I put on the staff, because there was no track record of that in high school with Mitchell that I'm aware of. But the point is, Preston Frizzell is that Mitchell Evans type of prospect. But you got to compliment him with an elite prospect, and that's exactly what they did. And that's why I'm encouraged by it. Now we just got to see what they do in 2026. So I'll say this, Shaun, moral of the story, I'm a lot more optimistic about the direction of tight end recruiting now than I was at this time a year ago. And it's not just because Mike Denbrock was hired and what we're hearing about. It's the results. It's look who they got in 26 and look at the early board in 27 and what kind of talent they were able to get on campus for Irish Invasion. That tells you a lot, is who's going to come and work out, who's serious enough about you to spend their money to come work out at your camp in front of your coaches to impress you in hopes of being the guy that you pursue. So in that regard, so far, absolutely so good. And when it comes to taking tight end level to another recruiting, was it bad before? No, but the standard at Notre Dame is elite, and I don't think it was elite. What say you?
You hit on something, and I think anytime you take over for someone, whether it's a head coach, position coach, and they had success before you, or even if they didn't have success before you, it doesn't mean a thing, right? You've heard several great coaches mention that. I think it was a couple. I've heard a couple of Alabama people say they've been in the locker room after winning a national championship, and Nick Saban would dismiss all of the seniors and underclassmen that are going to the NFL and would tell the next squad, none of this means anything to you moving forward. Your team will be totally different, right? And so it's the same thing. You have to approach coaching and recruiting because everything is always shifting and changing, right? We pray, all of us, that this is a very healthy fall camp because this coaching staff is going in with a plan moving forward to August the 31st. But I'm sure Charles Jagasaw was ajar. Oh man. Not that the coaches are like, oh, the season is over. No, that's why we recruit. That's why we coach. Next man in. Somebody's about to get an opportunity to become a really good player on the offensive line. And that's what you have to do. So,
But your point right there, what you're talking about right now is exactly what I'm talking about. When what we're talking about when we say that I don't know that tight end recruiting has been good enough, because here's my response. When Charles Jagasaw went down, we were like, man, that sucks. But, okay, Sully Absher, Gerby Lambert, Will Black, right? Who's the next man up? Where if Eli Raridan went down, that's a far more traumatic experience for Notre Dame fans than if Charles Jagasaw went down. If, God forbid, Jeremiah Love went down, we'd be devastated, but we'd be like, all right, Jeremiah Love is down. That's terrible, but Jadarian Price, step on up. And you're the next 1,000-yard back in Notre Dame. You know what I mean? Come on down. Hey, Aeneas Williams, Kedron Young, Nolan James Jr., Jabron Payne, you're still going to have one of the best running back rooms in the country. Maybe you go from 1 to 5, but still going to be one of the best. If Eli Raridan went down, this tight end room is not a top 10 tight end room. And that's evidence that, no, it hasn't been. And part of that's injury, but even if Cooper Flanagan was healthy, Cooper Flanagan's a good traditional throwback tight end that can do some good things in the pass game. I mean, he caught a corner route for a big play, second half against Texas A&M. But he's not that sort of Eli Raridan high-level type of talent, and I think that's exactly my point, is this is why you have to recruit that position on a more consistently elite level to where when you have a stud like Eli Raridan and you lose him, it doesn't completely devastate your room. And that's, I get that injuries are part of that. Well, if Kevin Bauman didn't have injuries, he wouldn't be on the team right now. He'd be in the NFL. He wouldn't be a 60-year senior at Notre Dame if it wasn't for injuries. And that's the point. Has it been good? Yeah, it's been good. A lot of teams would love Notre Dame's tight end room. But this is Notre Dame. It hasn't been elite and needs to be elite. And if it's not, then we need to be able to say, okay, it hasn't been. It's time to make it better.
Great example. Great example. Let's take Aeneas Williams and Jack Larson. 2 kids in the same class. Plenty of injuries at the tight end position last year. Jack Larson didn't get a lot of run. You had 2 of the top running backs in the nation in the running back room. And Aeneas Williams forced the coaching staff to play him. They didn't have to play him. I'm sure they didn't think, hey, we got these 2 guys. And we got some veterans.
Well, and let's not forget, Aeneas started to get mentioned in the spring before.
Absolutely. So that just goes to show you the tight end position at Notre Dame used to have guys like that forced themselves on the field, not just as a blocker. They forced themselves into the offense, a key component. Aeneas Williams was given third downs pretty much as a true freshman. Your third down back has to be proficient at what? Pass blocking, picking up the blitz. A true freshman proved that he made the coaches make a decision to say, we got to get this dude on the field. Now, based upon the team, he probably was going to get snaps as a freshman just because Notre Dame was blowing teams out. Let's get some snaps to Aeneas. No, he made himself a prominent part of the offense. How many guys other than Michael Mayer at tight end forced the staff to make themselves a prominent part of the offense? It's not that we're saying they haven't gotten talented players in recruiting. They just haven't gotten those guys that have that buzz through the spring going into the fall, and the coaches we have to find a way to get this young man the ball. It hasn't been that many. And that's something that I remember when Derek Brown was being recruited, it was like, yo, we don't even throw the ball more than 15, 20 times a game. But good Lord, at least throw him the ball 5 of those times. And he was a true freshman. Like, that was the buzz. That was the talent. He forced him away in a crowded and talented tight end room. He made himself visible. And I think we begged the question, have we had those guys? I think Ian Premer is definitely going to be visible. I think Flanagan, starting on Thursday, is going to be visible. Those are the type of guys that you want to get on an annual basis in that tight end room. And, it's an honest question you can ask whether or not they've had those guys over the previous 2 to 3 years. I think the last combination, like I said, that I can remember going into a fall camp, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was that first fall camp with Eli Raritan and Holden Stays. That's when you heard buzz, and that's when you saw Notre Dame actually trying to find ways to use those young men as they went into the season. Other than that, there's a few hits and misses here. Not to say you didn't get good players that could develop into Notre Dame. For some reason, has this it's just a place where young men develop into really good tight ends, even if they're not top 100 elite talent, first round picks. The vast majority of the guys that come through the tight end room at Notre Dame end up being NFL players for a long time and really solid to good college football players. That lets you know right there that Notre Dame gets good players in the tight end room. But what we're speaking of today, getting back on track, we're getting those dudes in the tight end room on an annual basis. Even if it's one dude and then some other guys that are just good players, really good players. But can you go out and consistently get the dudes in the tight end room? I mean, that's what you want to see.
That's going to do it for recruiting topic, Shaun. I think that was a good analysis of it's been good, hasn't been elite. What we're seeing now, very exciting, but now build on it. I think that's kind of where we're at. But I do think the 25 and 26 classes of James Flanagan, Ian Premer, Preston Frizzell gives Notre Dame a really good, strong young nucleus to build around. And then now you look at a guy like Jack Larson, who is more of a niche player. When you have studs like that, now it's greater to emphasize the niche that Jack brings to the table. He doesn't have to be a guy that lines up on the edge and blocks a 9 technique, because you've got James Flanagan and potentially Ian Premer that can do that. And so I think that's part of it too, is this now makes Jack's role even more impactful, because you don't have to try to fit him into something that he's not. And I think that's kind of exciting. So we're going to get to the next segment here. We're going to talk a little Notre Dame here in a second. But before we do, folks, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review on whatever your favorite platform is. We would greatly, greatly appreciate that. But as always, make sure that you are doing, if you want to support Irish Breakdown, the absolute best way to do that is to sign up for our message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Shaun, you brought up something to me a couple weeks ago, and this is going to take us into topic number 2. We're always trying to think of topics to do, and you and I don't like to just do, let's preview the tight ends, let's preview the quarterbacks. Like, we try to get deeper and look bigger picture and different things like that. And you said something to me, and I hadn't really thought about this, like, as far as like doing a show, and something that we've talked about, together, but it wasn't something that was like ever like, like really dive into it the way that we did. And the question you asked me is, why do you think, what are you said like this, what are the 3 reasons that make you think, if you do, that this team is going to be different? So what do you mean? And so this is basically what the premise of the show is. It's, we've seen Notre Dame be really good in the past. 0-2, you have the great start to the season. And, it didn't go great at the end, but man, what a fun year that was for us as Notre Dame fans, just to kind of watch that season, and Notre Dame is back, and Ty Willingham's going to have them back and all that kind of stuff. And then the next year they go out 5-7. And then, we see Bob Davie come in and he actually, you could go back to the Bob Davie era if you really want to get into it, but like, Bob Davie replaces Lou, and are things going to be as good as they were before? And you're like, I don't know. And then he has that one great, 2000 season with some of the big wins. And you're like, okay, is he going to turn it around or not? And season doesn't end well. And, next year he loses, and then they're in trouble. And he gets fired. And then you get the Charlie Weiss era. And you think to that 05 season and just the magical season that was. You go 9-2 in the regular season, and you're literally a yard and a couple seconds away from beating USC, which was the juggernaut of the time. It'd be like, beating Georgia in the regular season in 2022. And that's the equivalent of what that would have been, how big the defending national champs, currently ranked number 1, just like rolling everybody. And you almost get that, just an absolutely magical season in 2005. The next year, they actually had a better record, but they were a worse team. And they were never the same under Charlie Weiss. And then you get to the Brian Kelly era, and you go to 2012, and you have this wonderful, magical season. They go 12-0, and despite there being some injuries, that was not a perfect season for Notre Dame in regard to they caught every break possible. They earned that 12-0. Then you go play for the national championship the next year, 9-4 season, and just some really just sloppy losses. You think of the loss to Michigan, where you're just like, man, that just was they just kind of outplayed you, outcoached the entire time, and it just was kind of a sloppy game. You then get smacked at home by Oklahoma. You lose on the road to Pitt. You get beat by Stanford again, and that was not a great Stanford team. And it just kind of disappoints you. 2015, okay, they're back. Notre Dame is back. Season didn't end well, but man, what a great year. Next year, you go 4-8. 2 years later, you're back 12-0, make it to college football playoffs. Big win over Michigan, big win over Stanford, big win at Virginia Tech. Just a great year. Yeah, you fell short. You got beat by the national champs in the semifinals, but what a great year. Then the next year, you go 11-2. It was one of the most unsatisfying and disappointing 11-2 seasons that I've ever watched, because you just weren't a very good football team. You beat up on a lot of bad teams. You played two ranked Power 5 ranked opponents, and one of them you kind of choked away a chance to win. The other one dominated you. Your only ranked win that year was over Navy. The rest of your schedule was pretty down. Maybe the next best win you had was Virginia. I think went like 9-5 that year. It's probably the second best team you beat. That Bryce Perkins led, Bronco Mendenhall led team. That was disappointing. You bounce back in 2020, go to the college football playoff in the wild COVID year, which I will take to my grave as the best coaching job Brian Kelly ever did. When you consider just all the craziness that season, the next year Notre Dame goes 11-1. But again, Shaun, it was the most unsatisfying 11-1 season ever. You beat 0 ranked football teams. You played one ranked team, one team that finished ranked at the end of the year. And that was Cincinnati, and they embarrassed you on your home field. You barely beat Toledo. You had comeback win after comeback win. You had to come back and beat Virginia Tech. You had to come back and beat Wisconsin in the fourth quarter. You had to come back and beat Toledo in the fourth quarter. And honestly, your overall schedule was just really just not good. And now we're here again. 2024, college football playoff, make a run to the national championship game, beat Georgia, beat Penn State, beat Texas A&M on the road. Great season, magical season. And we're here in 2025 saying, okay, is this going to be different? Or is this just going to be kind of and what does it mean? They're going to be good, but do they take a step, or can they at least maintain? And that's kind of the question that you look at, Shaun, and that's posed here is, will this team be different? So first we'll answer that question. And then 2, why? So I'll let you begin, Shaun, so I've set the stage for what we're discussing. I'm going to let you begin talking about A, why you think this team do you think this team is better? And then we'll probably give our top 3 reasons. So I'll have you give one, and then we'll kind of go that way. The 3 reasons of why we think what we think. So to begin, Shaun, do you think this team will be different? And then tell us the biggest reason why you think this team will be different.
Yeah, so I battled because I didn't just list 3. I put them in order of importance to me of why. And this one snuck up because I had depth. I was going to go with depth, number 1, just the depth, the roster, injuries impacting, because I think injuries flat out, 2015 was probably the last time I felt like this is a real contender for a national championship, and injuries right off the bat just snuffed it out, right? And so I think this team, like you mentioned, there are certain guys that if they get injured, probably be really jarring to the team and to the chances of winning a national championship. But the roster has been built in such a way, and what you just seen them, how you seen them run to the national championship with an injury-riddled season, you feel like that's already set in place for this program and these players to be able to overcome that. But the off-season approach by the head coach, that is number 1 for me. When I heard how Marcus Freeman was still seething, that this man coming off 2 seasons where there were questionable losses, people were like, talking about putting him on the hot seat. And this man has the most wins in any Notre Dame season and a run to the national championship with probably one of the best head coaching jobs you've ever seen at Notre Dame. He has that in the back pocket going into the national championship. He's an underdog going into the national championship. And he's not sitting on his laurels saying, well, man, that was a darn good season. We got through that. Well, with everything, we should be proud. We should be happy. No, this dude was upset. There is no one that can tell him or convince him that he should not and his team should have not won that game on January 20th. You're not convincing him otherwise. And his approach to looking at every facet of his program and his team shows me that he's locked in to not let anything fall off. He won't allow it to happen. He's taking the accountability and responsibility. Before he even gets to the players, he's taking accountability over the offseason to say, this is going to continue to ascend. And I love his approach to everything he's done in the offseason. He said he wasn't as visible as he was in previous off seasons because he was locked in and he delegated some things. And even in doing that, the way he handled losing Chad Bolden and replacing Chad Bolden, the way he handled losing Dylan McCullough, replacing Dylan McCullough. He was I think even in those decisions, Brian, we've seen him have to replace guys on his staff, but the searches were quite more public, in my opinion, in previous years. He was very quiet with the way he went about things. And I think we knew the guys that he was going after, specifically for the general manager position. But when that main guy...
That's because those sides were talking a lot more.
Absolutely.
Not so much that Notre Dame was putting that stuff out there. That's those guys were saying, hey, talking to media people saying, hey, that didn't happen with the D coordinator.
And I think that speaks, I think your head coach has a quiet confidence about himself now. To whereas now he knew he wanted to be an elite coach. He had the audacity in recruiting and in other areas to sit down at that main table with Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney to announce, I'm here, Notre Dame's here. But now, by going through the ups and downs, let me tell you something, Brian. I taught this yesterday. Everybody has a story, man. Everybody has a story. You know the difference between the superhero and the villain, Brian? Their character. That's it. Their character. Either your character makes you the superhero going through what you went through, or it makes you the villain or the criminal going through what you went through. And he has gone through some stuff, and his character has taken him to the place where he's one of the best head coaches. Man, there's not a lot of people that go through those difficulties and those losses. Even the way the way he stuck by Riley Leonard early. It's a lot of head coaches.
Everybody was calling for him to be gone.
Man, it would have been easy.
Yes.
To move on to Steve Angeli. Easy.
Season's over. We lost Northern Illinois. We're not a championship team. We're not going to the playoff. Let's move on to our younger guys.
Let's move on. And we are a good football team. This is our guy. We can win with him. We can get to the national championship and win a national championship with this guy. I don't care what you guys are talking about. He's our quarterback. And that just speaks to, that really speaks to who he has become.
That's my top reason is coaching in general. And obviously Marcus Freeman's at the top of that. I mean, your point, I love your analogy because I think of when you look at like Homelander, for example, he's kind of like from The Boys, he's kind of like this combination of like Superman and Captain America, but more so like Superman. But he's a sociopath, right? So he's a villain. And like that's a great analogy. I've never even thought of it like that. That's phenomenal. But it is so true because your character defines what you do. When everybody can be a cool person when things are going great. It's like I deal with this with people who have their faith challenged all the time. And I have relatives like this where it's like, man, God is good when life is good. But when life's not good, you're like, what's the problem, God? It's like, okay, now it's getting hard. And all of a sudden you want to blame God for everything that's going on. Like, okay. And like now your faith is all of a sudden shook. Like what Paul says in Philippians 4:13 is I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. It's not about I can pick up this car if I have enough faith. It's no, I'm going to be content whether I'm rich or poor, imprisoned or free. Like I'm going to find contentment in that moment. So my character doesn't change because of the circumstance that I'm going through. And that is such a great analogy that you use, Shaun, because it's cool to be that cool head coach that is fun with the media and cool in the locker room and all this kind of other stuff. When you are winning, but can you be that guy when times are tough? Or do you start blaming other people? Do you start kind of saying, hey, it's this guy, it's that, it's we're this, you make silly comments, and all these other things like we've seen from previous coaches. When times get tough, that is when your character is truly exposed. And we saw that last year when Notre Dame was down. Marcus Freeman could have flinched. I kind of expected him to flinch to be honest with you, because that was a far more devastating loss than Stanford or Marshall, simply because of the expectation of this team compared to that team in 2022. And if you would have thrown Riley Leonard under the bus, you're flinching. You're literally doing the opposite of what you're telling your players to do. And we've seen past coaches use guys as scapegoats. Saw Jack Cohn kind of get used as a little bit of that by the previous head coach. So it is interesting to see, Shaun, but it doesn't stop there. It's not just Marcus Freeman. Why do I have more faith that this team is going to be different? It's the presence of Mike Denbrock. It's the presence of Mike Mickens. It's the presence of Al Washington. It's the presence of Mike Brown. It's the presence of Joe Rudolph. There's continuity. There's guys that have shown a certain floor. Does Joe Rudolph need to do better this year than he did last year? Yeah, but he showed me something last year compared to what he did the year before. There's now a new baseline. The baseline was here after year one. The baseline is now here after year two. Like there's still some question marks. How's Chris Ash going to be? Marty Biaggi does some things that kind of frustrate me, but he does a lot of things that I really like. And he's been a better special teams coordinator, in my opinion. Actually, the funny thing is, the one thing that I most assumed Notre Dame was going to be really good at under Marty Biaggi because of his track record, they haven't been very good at, which is field goal percentage. Now, I don't really put that on him because, like I said, if Mitch Jeter's not injured last year, the field goal percentage looks way different. But it is just kind of ironic. that the coverage teams have been outstanding. You know, they've gotten they've gotten some blocks. They do some good things. And so there's a level of preparation and coaching and development. I watch what the D line did last year after losing Boubacar and Jordan Patojo and Jason Onye, and just you go through the year. Gabriel Rubio misses a third of the year with an injury. Riley Mills goes down, and they just still went out there and kept battling, kept plugging away, kept doing what they needed to do. And then lo and behold, they're able to beat Penn State and Georgia without Riley Leonard, without Boubacar, without Jason Onye, without Jordan Patojo, with Howard Cross, a shell of himself. Because it's like, look, next man up, and you're going to get prepared to play at a high level. And are there things Joe Rudolph has got to do a better job with? Of course. Are there some things he did that I would have wished he would have done differently last year? Sure. But the fact of the matter is, he did lose Charles Jagasaw. He did lose Ashton Craig. He did lose Billy Shrouth. He did all these things. And he found a way to get the guys ready to go play at a level higher than what we saw from, like 2021 offensive line, for example. And I think that's where I have a level of confidence where I didn't. In 2013, I had confidence in Brian Kelly because I don't know that I had completely jumped off the bandwagon yet. That didn't really happen until the 2015 offseason and really the 2015 season, because I agree with you, Shaun. I still think that was one of the most wasted championship opportunities of my lifetime since 1993, really. When you look at a team that had all that, and the fact that he didn't make the transition from year one to year two at coordinator was like, okay, I don't know this is going to be good. And then when he doesn't make it again after 2015, you have Jalen Smith and all these NFL players, and you still can't hold teams to less than 20 points a game with that talent. And then I was kind of like, okay, he just ain't that guy. And then some of the stuff I heard and all that, like, I don't know that I had expectations of 2016, which is why I said at the time, I said on Bill King's show, like, look, this team's either going to figure out their problems and work stuff out and be pretty good again, because there is talent, or they're going to implode. Like, I did not have a lot of faith in that team. You look at 2021, I had faith in that team because of the talent, but it wasn't developed properly because you had a coach who wanted out the whole season. We now know why that team didn't live up to expectations. That right there is the biggest thing for me, Shaun. In 2019, same kind of deal. I just didn't have a lot of faith that Brian Kelly was going to be able to get the most out of that team. It was had the potential to be really good, but I don't know that I had a lot of faith that he was going to do it. And that's different now.
And I think
it's him on down. It's Freeman on down.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important because you hit an important point, and in the chat was spot on, because it does take talent to win. But what you're watching with Notre Dame, as evidenced by last season and everything that you just laid out perfectly, Brian, that team was a direct reflection of their head coach. That team took on the character of that head coach, what he had gone through the previous, not flinching after the first two seasons on his program and what he believed in, not flinching on the quarterback he believed in. This team, even after losing to Northern Illinois and all of those injuries, they believed in who they were. And they believed that who they were was still good enough to win football games and win a championship. And no one can convince them otherwise. That is a team. That's why head coaches are important, because they infuse character into the young men. The assistant coaches infuse character into now. Why I'm confident, I believe this is a program that has character, not just talent. They have character that's going to carry them through from top to bottom. They're going to be every team has a story. Like I said, every team can tell you about that moment where they could have come apart at the seams. Every year, every team has a moment where it was one thing said by the coach or one thing said by a player that kept things together. Every championship team, go ask Ohio State. They have a story. I bet you after that Michigan game, there's a lot of things that could have happened to that season and to that team. But the character moving forward allowed them to win. And you have to tip your cap to the guy that he was taking a beating after the Michigan game, on top of taking a beating the previous 2 seasons for their losses to Michigan and losses in the playoffs. But he found a way as the head coach to keep the program going and keep it ascending. And that takes character. As much as he could be born on second base, third base, wherever he was born, it takes character to lead young men and to lead a group of men, in period, in a program to that ultimate success. And so the character of Marcus Freeman, and like you said, the character, when you have good character, you usually are good at seeing others with good character. And now, man, you watch Jawan Sider and how he's recruited and how he's being received by the current running backs. You look at Mike Martin on the recruiting trail and how you talked about important conversations he's had with a couple of recruits that led to them ultimately committing. This program and the direction in its totality, on the field, off the field, and just even how he is kind of, I don't want to say bridge the gap, if there was a gap between football program and school and faculty. If there was a perceived gap, that gap is...
There was absolutely a gap because previously there were coaches, and this isn't unique to Brian Kelly. Bob Davie was this way. Ty Willingham was this way to a degree, where what was going on campus was used as an excuse for why they couldn't win. Now, under Bob Davie, I think there was probably a legitimate reason to feel that way. Under Ty, there was a legitimate reason to feel that way because I don't know that those guys got the same support that Brian Kelly got. I don't think that Charlie Weiss necessarily got the support from the school that Brian Kelly got. And that's the difference, but that's the fact, is it was always somebody else's fault. And the thing I like about this current staff is there's a level of accountability where, and I've shared this story before, but I think back to Marcus Freeman's first game calling defense for Notre Dame. He gives the wrong signal for the call. Call goes in wrong, Florida State goes off for a long touchdown. So what does he do? Is immediately gets sidelined? That's on me. That's on me. I screwed up. I got the wrong call in. That's on me. Like, players went back to the bench thinking they're about to get chewed out. And you say, okay, there's like, oh wow, okay, coach is doing what he's asking us to do. That coach asked us to be accountable, and he's being accountable. That wasn't true from before. And like, you need that. But 2011, 2013, 2019 and 2015, Shaun, are reasons why I never put talent first anymore in these conversations. Because I've seen teams with talent that didn't even come close to competing for a championship. Don't even make me list the 2011 roster again. You're literally going to have 2 future Hall of Famers on that roster, and they went 8-5. And that's not even including Tyler Eifert and Michael Floyd and Darius Fleming and Manti and all those. I mean, Manti Te'o will eventually be a college football Hall of Famer. You had 2 future NFL Hall of Famers and a future college football Hall of Famer on that team, and you went 8-5. And they were veterans. They weren't freshmen. They were veterans. 2 of them were done after that year. And so that is still reason number 2. Because you could also have the best coaching in the world, and if you don't have the players, you're not getting it done. And it's not just talent, it's the depth of talent. I think it's fair to say that there have been teams under Brian Kelly whose top 5 might be more talented than the top 5 on this team. It's at least debatable. Because when I look back to that 2015 team that has Jalen Smith, Will Fuller, Ronnie Stanley, Quentin Nelson, Mike McGlinchey, like, I didn't even mention CJ Prosise. I didn't even mention Kavari Russell. I didn't mention Isaac Rochelle. I didn't mention Jerron Jones. I didn't mention, a lot of good players on that team. I'll stack that 5 up against a lot of people. 2012, Manti, Zach Martin, Tyler Eifert, Stephon Tuitt, Lewis Nix. That's a pretty darn good top 5. What the difference is now 6 through 30, you're better. 6 through 40, you're better. And this is the point that I've made about that Alabama game in 2012. I'll take Notre Dame's top 5 and stack that up against Bama's top 5. Again, we're talking about some of the best ever do it. Tyler Eifert, Zach Martin, Manti, Stephon Tuitt, Lewis Nix. But Bama had their 6 through 10 was as good as their top 5. Their 11 through 15 dominated the Notre Dame's 11 through 15. That was the difference, that in size. That's what the difference was. Now you look at it and you say, I'll take Notre Dame's starting lineup athletically top to bottom and stick it up against anybody's, not just their top 5. Whereas now it's not, man, I think Drake Bowen could be a stud at Notre Dame, but I hope he's not hurt by the fact he's playing next to insert linebacker that's a nice player but shouldn't be a starter at Notre Dame. Now it's like, who's he going to start? Which stud is he going to start next to? Is it going to be Kingston? Is it going to be Jalen Sneed? Is it going to be Jaden Alsbury? It's like which guy is it going to be? You're not asking for the tryhard guys to become prominent players anymore. The tryhard guys are now great depth players. They're great special teams players. Now the version of tryhard for this team is like Bodie Cahoon, who's 6'2", 240, runs a 4.5. That's the tryhard guy now. That's the version, this team's version of the tryhard guy. It's Teddy Rizak who runs a 4.5. I mean, that's where it's a little bit different, Shaun. It's the talent, it's the depth of talent, where you can lose a Charles Jagasaw and put in an Anthony Knapp, not have to try to figure it out with a Michael Carmody or a Tosh Baker who just weren't ready and weren't left tackles. You can lose a Benjamin Morrison and replace him with a Leonard Moore, who's an elite talent. That's the difference between then and now. Is injuries at times back then were more devastating. Now, 2015 team, I thought, did a decent job of overcoming those injuries. I don't think that team went 10-2 in the regular season because they had injured players. I don't think that's the case. I think that the coaching didn't always know how to get the most out of some of those players. So I think that's the thing is it's the coaching, which includes development, but also the depth of talent for this team is as good as it's been since Lou Holtz was the head coach. And I'm talking like prime Lou Holtz was the head coach. That's also why I have a different feeling about this team than I have teams in the past.
Yeah, talent's second for me as well. And I think it's all tying together. What we're saying, and even the chat has been fantastic today because, it does take talent to win championships. But the talent has been elevated by the head coach that came in and went after guys that previously Notre Dame wasn't going after. That's the only way you're going to get better talent is by going after them, recruiting them, and getting them to commit to your school. He's done that. And absolutely, Brian Kelly resuscitated the program, if that's the word you want to use, took them to great heights, but he couldn't get over that last obstacle, which was what? Winning big games against top talented teams. Notre Dame has been able to acquire talent, which they weren't doing at a certain level, and then they were able to take that talent and win big games, which they weren't able to do. So that's it. You're right. He was left with a really good program, but he took it to the next level. That's what you're supposed to do. Everyone should take what is given to you and improve upon it. And Marcus Freeman has done that. And he's done that by acquiring great players that has given us the confidence because the depth is exactly what he said after losing to Oklahoma State in the bowl game, moving into that spring. I don't want ones and twos. Remember this? I don't want ones and twos. I want 1A and 1B in this program. And people laughed at him because of the state of the roster at that point. And here we sit 3 years later, and we're saying we have more confidence because we look at the roster and we see 1As and 1Bs. We were laughing looking at talented players that might end up third string in the secondary. When we, for a decade, secondary was looked at in a negative light at Notre Dame. And now we're at a point where Mike Nichols and Marcus Freeman has turned it into. I just watched the Wisconsin game you spoke of earlier at Soldier Field with Jack Cohn.
Mm-hmm.
Cam Hart had 2 interceptions in that game. He had just flipped over from offense.
Yeah.
He had just flipped over from offense and was the star of the secondary. But he had to be that. They didn't have a choice because of the talent or the lack thereof. And now we're talking about top 100 players on the roster possibly being the third string safety or being the third string defensive back. It's crazy the 180 that's happened. So absolutely, like I agree with what everybody's saying, but it still goes back to what has changed and what has allowed Notre Dame to get to this point to have elite coaching and an elite roster from a talent standpoint.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest the things I get tired of hearing the most is that Freeman inherited a much better program than Brian Kelly inherited. And I think that is true in this regard. Brian Kelly arrived at Notre Dame in a situation where the facilities and the overall state of the program off the field was not up to par. It wasn't. The notion that Marcus Freeman inherited a better roster than Brian Kelly could not be further from the truth. And there's still people making that claim. Like, I kind of feel like that's part of the propaganda machine that Brian Kelly brought with him to Notre Dame. That he was so good at employing. His political background gave him a great understanding of the need to manipulate the media and manipulate the supporters of your program so that you could say things like that. Like, do I really need to remind people of the players that Brian Kelly inherited and the holes that were also on the team that Marcus Freeman inherited? Both coaches had things they had to overcome. Both coaches had strong foundations. The person who's primarily responsible for fixing the things that were broken at Notre Dame when Brian Kelly took over was Jack Swarbrick, not Brian Kelly. Jack Swarbrick's the one that rose the money to get the new field. He's the one that rose the money for the new indoor facility. He's the one that rose the money and spearheaded the Campus Roads project. So I think that it's not as simple as saying, oh, you were given this great situation and you got to make it better, because I think what we're seeing now, and part of where my confidence is from, is it's an embracing of what makes Notre Dame unique compared to the previous 10 plus years where you fought against what made Notre Dame unique. And when you're fighting against the things that make you unique, that make you who you are, you're always going to put a cap on yourself because you're unwilling to say, hey, look, what other people find to be a weakness, we're going to turn into a strength. Lou Holtz did that in a big way. His thing was always, hey, we're going to be the most physically, mentally tough team in the country because nobody else has to go through what we have to go through. This whole thing of having to go to class, having to live in dorms without air conditioning, et cetera, all the things people complain about, that's why we're tougher. That's why we're going to win. And that's the difference. And that's where a word that you and I use a lot, Shaun. This is kind of my third reason why is it's a different culture now than it was before. And it kind of ties in with number one, because culture to me is established at the top. There's no more excuses. There's more accountability now, partly because of coaching, but also partly because of the roster. There was a time where Brian Kelly and his defense had to make some really tough decisions about how he wanted to punish certain players, because what came after that was way different. And he didn't do a good enough job recruiting and developing to have options after that. Now it's like, okay, you don't want to do what you need to do? Cool. Next man up. And this guy actually might be more talented than you are. And that's, I think, the difference. But also, last year, I believe that the Northern Illinois game, Shaun, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I feel that the Northern Illinois game last year was needed for Marcus Freeman in this program. There needed to be that final. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. There needed to be that final character test, because that team showed us all a lot when they went down to College Station and walked into that environment that we were told all summer it's going to be too hot. It's going to be too loud. It's the toughest place to play in college football. Now, apparently, it's not even in the top 20, according to, CFB, college football 2026. And all this talent, Mike Elko, blah, 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 almost beat you last year, Duke. They handled that business and did what they need to do to get that win. And that team was feeling really good about itself. And I think there was a little bit of final thought of it. I think Marcus Freeman said it perfectly. The next week he said, we had to learn how to win, or we had to learn how to handle success. And I think throughout Marcus Freeman's tenure, they had proven that they could handle adversity well. You start off 0-2, you bounce back, and you beat Cal, then you smack North Carolina, beat BYU. Like, that team responded well. I think that team responded very well from the Stanford loss. That could have sent that team down in the tank, and they didn't. They bounced back. We saw them have that really tough stretch between Ohio State and Louisville where they lost Ohio State, lost to Louisville, almost lost to Duke. And then how do they bounce back? Dominate USC, blow out Pitt, have a devastating loss to Clemson, and how they respond to that? 3 straight blowout wins. Like, we've seen this team respond well to adversity. What this team needed to learn last year was we're going to show that we can handle this kind of we've got to show that we can handle success. And that wasn't beating Miami and Louisville. It was beating Georgia Tech and Navy and Florida State and Army and Virginia and USC and Indiana, to where there was no more of those drop-down moments that we had seen where, okay, it looks like they turned the corner, and then here comes Stanford. Okay, it looks like they turned the corner, and here comes Clemson. It looks like they turned the corner, and here comes Louisville. It looks like they turned the corner, and here comes Northern Illinois. The 13 straight wins showed us that, okay, we think they've put that behind us. Now, this is the reason that this is the third for me is because this is the one that is still the least proven to me. Because we need to see them go out this season without the Northern Illinois motivation anymore and say, okay, can you now have that mindset when you don't have the game against Northern Illinois to push to? Because that game's not going to have, like, throwing that in their faces is not going to mean anything now. But Malachi Fitz, I'm like, I don't know. What are you talking about? What does Northern Illinois have? I didn't lose to Northern Illinois. CJ Carson be like, I played 0 snaps against Northern Illinois, coach. Like, I don't know. Like that, it's a different season. Now it's like, okay, is your culture strong enough to say we don't need that game anymore? We needed it last year, but learning from that game is why now we're in that position. And I think we see all great programs go through this. We saw Alabama go through this. Okay, yeah, they're a good team, but can you beat Florida? Yeah, you're a good team, but can you handle this? Can you bounce back from that? Man, you were so crushed by that loss to Florida that you also went out and got smacked by Utah in the Sugar Bowl. Like that's how much that Florida loss impacted you. You got embarrassed by Utah. And remember, this is back pre-players opting out of bowl games. You can't give me like, well, they didn't want to be there. Well, they were all there. Like they absolutely wanted to be there. That's a different era. It's not today's era. And how did they bounce back? They went out that next year, won the title, won 3 the next 4 titles, right? They showed they could kind of overcome adversity. They can handle success. Georgia showed that in 2022. Right? I mean, you finally get that Alabama monkey off of your back, and you go out there, and the next year you're a dominant football team. Oh, Michigan had to figure out a way to beat Ohio State, and they finally figured out that allowed them to turn the corner. And so you see Clemson had to figure out how to beat South Carolina and Florida State. They could beat everybody else. They couldn't beat South Carolina and Florida State. And then, they'd have these really good games, and then they'd go play those teams to get blown out. They figured out a way to handle success. And that's what I think Notre Dame has to still show. But I'm confident that the culture of the program, based on what we saw last year, based on the things you talked about in your first point about how and it's not just Marcus Freeman. I hear that from a lot of people around the program. that nobody looks at last year as a success. And what I mean success is obviously they're all proud of what they achieved, but they all look at it as a disappointment because they thought they should have won it all. Not Brian Driscoll said, you're at Notre Dame, so you should be this. They felt that way. There was no, well, if we just play a little harder and coach a little better. There was none of that. It was, I don't like this feeling. And I don't ever want to look like that again on that stage. So we're going to go out there this offseason. We're going to do this, and this, but we're going to play with a chip on our shoulder. This is not a team that has the attitude of a team that was national runners-up. This is the attitude of a team, what I've seen, that feels like they have something to prove. Like, man, what else do you have to prove? Like, yeah, a lot. And I think that's where I'm confident the culture has finally shifted and that foundation was laid. And that's sort of reason number 3 for me, Shaun, which is a lot like your number 1. It's just I separated the culture and the coaching part because I was more looking at it from like development, roster enhancement, just can you get the most out of players? This is deeper. Culture to me is deeper. It all ties together, but I wanted to be separate because it's deeper for me because this is more about what's your why? Like every day when you're home this summer or when you're out there and the coach, what's your why? Why are you giving everything you got in the weight room? Why are you giving everything you got on the field? Is it just because I don't want to get a beat out? Is it because my coach is making me? It's because my dad's pressuring me? Or is it because I want to be the best because I don't ever want to get to the point where I have to feel that again? Because I know I'm capable of more and I want to show more. And I think that's a big part of why I think the culture now is different from the one we've seen in the past, where they needed that loss to rebound that season. And the fact that we didn't see another game like that last year speaks to coaching is better, talent is better, culture's better. And I think those things are all important ingredients to a championship football team.
That's why every year being different is an amazing thing, right? Because it brings different tests. It's not too many people that go undefeated in college football. Like I said, every championship team has a moment, has a testing, whether it's a loss or whether it's inside the locker room, whatever it is, it's something. And if Northern Illinois was that test for that team, then so be it. I thought it was that, and the next week losing key cogs on the defensive offensive lines in the midst of a rout against Purdue.
Right.
I'm like, man, you respond on the field, but you lose 2 people on the offensive line, 2 people on the defensive line. That's the locker room. I'm thinking like, oh man, but they came right back out and just kept moving.
And that's the point. It's not the Northern Illinois loss. It's the fact that we didn't see another Northern Illinois loss. And that's how I said, it wasn't Purdue. It wasn't Miami. It wasn't Louisville for me. It was Georgia Tech. It was Navy. It was Army. It was Florida State. The fact that they went out there and didn't just win games, they smashed everybody they played until USC. And in that game where they didn't play well, they literally never trailed for a second of that game. That's the difference. And that's how you handle success. Because we always saw lose to Marshall and then show progress and then show progress, show progress. And then there's that step back moment. That's what Northern Illinois was. It was another step back moment. The fact that we didn't see that over the next 13 game winning streak is what we're talking about here to anyone actually listening, that it's handling success. All those other losses were how do you handle adversity? You bounce back and handle adversity. Pay attention. This is about how do you handle success. They're going to bounce back from that. We already knew they were going to do it. We talked about the time they're going to bounce back from this because that's what they do. It's can you handle success? Once you've moved past the moment of adversity, can you handle success? And that's what this team showed last season. Now they've got to show that they can continue to do that where they don't have a Northern Illinois to point to as the reason to stay humble, as the reason to stay working, as the reason to keep doing what they're doing. And that's going to be the thing that we're going to learn. And I think that we will learn that possibly because of the attitude they've had about losing to Ohio State this offseason.
Yeah. For me, my third reason, I packaged your third reason into my first.
Keep going.
Okay. I packaged your third reason I had packaged into my first reason. But for me, I think my third reason is the quarterback situation. I believe in the hope. I'm sorry. I have hope when it comes to these quarterbacks that they could raise the level of quarterback play in Notre Dame and raise everyone else on the offense to another level of efficiency. That's just the hope and belief I have. And maybe I'm out over my skis a little bit. That's fine. But I've watched it with my own eyes for the last 2 years. I've sat there and watched the other field and seen the talent, seen the arm strength, and been wowed by what I've seen on the other side of the field as practice was going on right in front of me. So I have reason to have hope, up close and personal evidence to have hope for what this offense can do with these first-time starters at quarterback. And for me, that is why I'm confident, because I feel like the missing element when you get into those big-time games in the semifinal and in the national championship, you're going to have to be able to throw the football. You're going to have to be able to make big plays in the passing game. And when Notre Dame started to do that in the second half, you saw they were able to put points on the board. And so that, for me, is the missing piece that I think from a recruiting and development standpoint, we're going to find out very quickly whether or not Notre Dame has answered the bell. I think they have answered that. And we're going to see it on full display, in my opinion. I truly believe that. That's my third reason why I feel confident. And it's amazing because we point back to 2015. It's very similar from this point. It's a competition going into the fall. There's a quarterback competition. I think in talking to several people, Malik established himself pretty early in that fall camp and allowed them to come out hitting on all cylinders.
He did that following the Music City Bowl.
Yeah, you probably could say
I
that.
would argue that Malik established himself started in the winter. The moment Everett transferred is when, in my opinion, Malik Zaire, it was partly because of Malik Zaire and him kind of, hey, this guy's kind of gonna take charge of this type of thing. And so your culture got established that offseason by your starting quarterback because of his leadership, not the leadership of the head football coach. It was the leadership of the quarterback and the leadership of that team, the Jalen Smiths, the guys that were like, hey, we're not gonna take this line down. We're gonna go out there and win this year. And to your point, Shaun, is I do think that the current, you saw it in the intel report that I put up about the quarterbacks, and especially one in particular, that there's a recognition in the room, the locker room, that, hey, we got some cats we can win with. And that's what was true last year with Riley Leonard. I'm not saying it wasn't true of Sam Hartman. But like, that's the thing is, like, look, if we can just give Riley time, we know he's going to go make a play. If we could just keep this thing close, we know Riley's going to step up and make a play. It may be running around, it may be throwing the ball, but Riley's going to step up and make a play. When you have a quarterback that you believe in, it just changes your whole dynamic. And like the Miami team last year, for the most part, was kind of the same Miami team from the previous year. What was different? There's a belief that, hey, if we got Cam back here, if we just keep this thing close, like, Cam's going to go make a play to help us win this football game. That was the biggest difference. And that was true with Riley as well, that, hey, keep blocking, keep working, keep running, because like Jaden Greathouse wasn't turning around blocking on that third down because he developed that relationship with Riley. Like, I know when Riley's tucking and running, and I know when he wants to do something different. Defense is thinking Riley's running, and Jaden's like, hey, let me get open here, and then boom, he hits him. If I keep working, I know he's going to get the ball to me. And if we just get a guy on a guy, we know that Riley's going to go out there and make a play for us. I think that's absolutely a big part of where my confidence is as well. We're on the same page on this next one, Shaun. I'm right there with you. I just think talent at quarterback is a big part of this. And when you look at past teams, 2013, you didn't have Everett Golson because he had gotten suspended. 2015 to 2016, you had a quarterback battle that I think was handled incredibly poorly that really rocked that locker room. I don't see that happening with this quarterback battle. You were moving on to a new quarterback in 2021 from what you'd had for 3 years. 2019, I don't think that was as much of a quarterback thing as just it was a leadership thing at the top. I just think created an environment where you just weren't going to get the most out of that team. And that wasn't Ian Book's fault. That was an overall leadership of the program problem. So I think all those things factor into where quarterback is lower on this list for me because I don't think they need the quarterback to be what some of those other teams needed the quarterback to be necessarily. If they get it, that's going to be a lot of fun. But I think this team needs the quarterback to play well, but it doesn't need the quarterback to play like Kyler Murray in 2018 or Trevor Lawrence in 2020, where he had to literally put that team on his shoulders and carry him. I don't think they need him to be like Joe Burrow 2019. They don't need that. They need him to just play, this is who you are. Let's go out and do it. I think that's going to be the big key.
I think they did a good job. This is the recognition of knowing what your team is. You can speak to this. I do. I don't envy coaches at all, especially head coaches and their assistants. Because when you hear them say every year is a different team, they're absolutely right. And every year you have to figure out the way that you're going to win. And you're constantly trying to figure out move and okay, we did this our best last year. What's going to be our go-to this year? What are we going to depend? Everything's different. And so I'm interested in seeing how they handle, having a certain, we jokingly say, Malik jokingly says, Coach Denbrock probably this year is like, hey, honey, where can you get the LSU playbook out the attic? Can you get the Jaden Daniels plays out the attic? I might need those this year, because it's just certain things that as a creator, he probably wants to go and do a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. But you figure out this is who we are, this is what we do best, and we're going to make sure that we do it the best so that we can win. And I'm super excited to find out what is going to be Notre Dame's, what's going to be the best for Notre Dame this year, specifically offensively. I'm super excited to find out what that's going to be with these two young quarterbacks.
It's there's a lot of things I'm sure Mike Denbrock would have liked to have done last year that he couldn't. Just like there's going to be some things this year that I'm sure Mike Denbrock's going to. I promise you, there's going to be a 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 situation where Mike Denbrock's thinking, "Man, I wish Riley Leonard, miss Riley Leonard." It just those moments present themselves. Just like there's times last year where he was like, "Man, I miss Jaden Daniels," or "Man, I miss Everett Golson," or whatever. Because there are just some things you wanted to do. Hey, I know we can go after this team this way, but I don't know that we have the personnel at receiver. And sometimes we're talking about the quarterback, but man, I sure miss having Malik Neighbors and Ryan Thomas, because calling plays is a whole lot easier when you got them cats running around. I mean, but good coaches build around their talent. And to your point, there's certainly some things that we didn't see last year that we're going to see this year. And sometimes we'll see the same thing we saw last year, but the volume is different. The manner in which they went about it's going to be different. So I think all those things are a part of it. But I think the final piece for me, Shaun, is I think why I'm confident is I think the bar has been raised defensively from where it was in the past. And I look at it and say, I think that this defense is capable of saying there's a floor now that's here because of the mindset of the head coach, but even more so because of the fact that the talent has been elevated to the degree where you can just go out talent people more than what they were able to do in the past. And now it's kind of like, how bad of a coach would Chris Ash have to be to not have a pretty good defense with this unit? And that's never been the question about Chris Ash. Is it going to be championship caliber? But it's going to be pretty good. And the fact that I now expect I have more faith that both sides of the ball are going to be top 10 caliber units, that there's not a side of the ball that you have to overcome, which was not always true in past years. Is that part going to be good enough? Like when you think about the areas that we were concerned about in 2021, we were like, I don't know how good this offensive line is going to be. I don't know how good the receiving core is going to be other than Kevin Austin. I don't know how good the secondary is going to be. There's a lot of I don't even know if they're going to be good, much less championship caliber. You look at this team and you're saying, what are your concerns? Is tight end going to be good enough to win a championship? Is which stud next to Don Schuler is going to step up at safety? Is the D-line that you had that basically beat Penn State and Georgia, you lose from that R.J. Oben and Howard Cross, but you get back Jason Onye and Bubakar Traore and eventually Jordan Patelho and Bryce Young. I mean, that unit, is it going to be good enough? I think that's all part of it. Where just the bar has been raised on the defensive side of the ball. And then you combine that with what I believe to be kind of from the previous points about the offense, quarterback, Denbrock, talent, all that. I feel like this team all around doesn't have you have to carry this side anymore. Like 2015 was like, they got a shot to be pretty good if the offense can carry the defense, because I don't know if that guy that we saw coaching that defense last year is going to be good enough to get the most out of this talent. Like the bar has been raised so much higher now than that. And then the opposite was kind of true in like some of those other years. Like, is the offense going to be good enough in the big games for this team to win? And I think they showed that a little bit more last year. So I just think those are all things that factor in, Shaun, for me, of why I'm a little bit more optimistic this year that this team is going to be different. Coaching, depth of talent, culture, trust at quarterback, and just looking all around and saying that the bar has been raised really on both sides of the ball to where the floor now is what the ceiling used to be on both sides of the ball. I mean, last year we were all kind of looking at 36 points a game. I hope they can I hope they can do better than that this year. 36 points a game is more points than Notre Dame scored any single season of the Brian Kelly era. Most they ever scores 34.5. Again, I think the bar's been raised, and that's my final reason for optimism. You got anything else you want to add to that, Shaun? You got any other points, or are we kind of handle them all?
Yeah, those are my three. I think we're spot on. Lock, step, lock and step, and different orders, different nuance to it, but it's all the same. It's all the same.
That's going to finish part 2 of our show today. Our team, the T of RTCF, our team topic. Reminder, folks, before we move into part 3, if we get asked a lot, hey, how can I support Irish Breakdown? Best way to do that, down there, you see it on the crawler, boards.irishbreakdown.com, boards.irishbreakdown.com. Sign up for an annual membership, monthly membership, join a booster club. If you join a booster club, you get some free gear, you get some IB merch in return for that. But that's always the best way to support us. If you're not a message board person, that's fine. You can lurk however often you like, but it's still the absolute best way to support what we're doing at Irish Breakdown, help us to continue to grow and do even more with the content here, but also the content that we're doing on the message board. So definitely want to check that out at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Final piece of this conversation, Shaun, is today's show is the CF part of RTCF, which stands for college football. We're going to take a college football topic, and I think this is a great topic to build on from our previous show. previous segment, which is we are going to look and discuss. And Shaun and I have not compared notes because we want this to kind of both, like not be influenced, not talk each other out of a team or into a team, in our conversation. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down the teams by conference that we think are legit title contenders to some degree, like unlikely, dark horse, whatever. And we'll kind of identify, are they a top contender? Are they a bit of a dark horse contender? And we'll explain that all. And so we're going to go ACC, Big 12, Big 10, SEC, and then everybody else. Is there anybody outside the Power Four? Hint, hint. There is one, and we talk about them a lot. That is going to be on this show. And I will say, first of all, Shaun, as we dive into this, there are more teams on my list than I thought I would have otherwise. I predicted 8-9, and I actually have 8 teams that I view as top contenders, but I actually have 5 other teams that I want to mention as potential dark horses, and that list is a little bit deeper than I thought it was going to be. So I'm looking forward to this. So let's begin, Shaun. In the ACC, how many teams from the ACC do you have on your list as title contenders for the? And when we talk about title contenders, it's essentially, are you good enough to get to the semis? Because if you're good enough to get to the semis, you're good enough to kind of win it all, in my opinion, in today's era. That wasn't always true in the past. If you got to the Final Four, because you didn't have to kind of go through a non-conference gauntlet in the round 1 and the quarterfinals to really prove how good you are. I think it's different now. If you can get to the semis, you've got a shot. And that's why I think all the semifinal games last year were competitive. Texas gave Ohio State a great game. Penn State gave Notre Dame a great game. I think the best team won both of those games, but they were hard fought, down to the wire, excellent postseason college football games, where in the past, just because you were in the Final Four doesn't mean you were one of the 4 best teams, because of the way the system was. It was kind of harder to gauge. So if you can get to the Final Four, you've got a shot, even if it's an outside shot, to win it all. And that's kind of how we look at it. So who from the ACC, Shaun, do you have on your list for title contenders? Let's start with your top one. So give me your number, and then we'll start with the top team in the ACC, according to both of us.
I'm going to be honest. I just have Clemson for the ACC. That's it for me. As a true, and I really do think they're a true title contender this year. I really do.
You'd put them in the top contender category?
Yeah, I would. I really would. I was really sometimes you have moments. You talked about that Music City Bowl in 2014 and how it kind of led into 2015 and what it could be for Notre Dame. I really think even though it wasn't the same result, Notre Dame won that game against LSU. Clemson lost to Texas, but the character and the response that they showed, and they're really young. The defense has always been, it varies a little bit. I think the defensive line, although talented and heralded, I don't think they gave the production that most people thought that they would give. But I think they kind of get back to that. The one thing I do worry about is their secondary a little bit. But I think overall you're going to see that stout Clemson defense. But what's coming offensively, and of course, it all rests on the shoulders of Cade Klubnik. It just does. But he has so many weapons at his disposal now that he would just have to fall off the cliff to not have a successful season, in my opinion. And I think they're going to do enough. I think they'll probably get a couple of scares, a couple of good games in the ACC to kind of get them ready. But I do think they have the potential, the coaching, and the talent to be one of the top contenders in college football for a national championship and to make a run.
I'm with you on Clemson. I think that's why the Tom Allen hire was so important, because I think that we were in a situation last year where I did not feel like the talent that they did have was being maximized, especially on defense. You started to see it late in the year with when you looked at sort of how the offense started to kind of, to a degree, show its potential. It wasn't consistent, but you saw the potential with the freshman receiving core and and the offensive line finally kind of got settled in and healthy. And to your point, though, Shaun, the problem with that team was you got way too much talent on the front seven and at linebacker, and even to a degree in the secondary, to be losing as many games as you guys are losing, or at least to be looking as mediocre as you do at times, playing defense as you do. I mean, you're just like, how is that team not better? How is that defense not more dominant? And it was a frustrating to watch. And I think the same thing is true of the offensive line. I think that's really the big key for me for Clemson this year. It's, does their offensive line play to its potential? I have a level of confidence in the Clemson defense because of what Tom Allen has shown, running a defense at Indiana, running a defense last year at Penn State. I thought he did a great job with that unit last season. I mean, look, the only game where I thought the defense really was the problem was the Oregon game. And they were just out athleted in that game. I mean, they didn't have the speed on defense to run with that team. And I mean, they didn't lose to Ohio State because of the defense. They didn't lose to Notre Dame because of the defense. I mean, some of that was just Notre Dame guys making great plays. I mean, some of those third down plays that Riley Leonard made were like, I don't know what you're supposed to tell that guy on 3rd and 9 to do against Jane Greathouse. That was a great ball, great catch. It's just sometimes you just got to tip your cap, say, that guy's really flipping good. You know, and I think that's what last year's game more so was. And so when I look at this Clemson team, I see them as one of those, they're going to make a jump type of teams this season, as long as their offensive line can be as good as expected. It's like, I'm not overly worried about running back if the line's good. Like, I remember in 2017, Shaun, you remember the Michigan State game, 2017, they're on the road playing a top 15 team that ended up winning 10 games that year, Michigan State. Really good run defense. They finished, I think, that year with the number 3 rush defense in the country, maybe number 2. Great run defense that year. And Tony Jones Jr. is already out to start the game because he got hurt the week before against Boston College. First half, Josh Adams gets hurt. Dex comes in, has one big run, catches a touchdown pass. He gets hurt. They're now down to Deion McIntosh, and they're running on Penn State in the fourth quarter. And you're just like, it doesn't matter who the back is. It's the line. And look, Clemson's got enough talent at running back that if their line plays well, they're going to be fine at running back. They've got to play well there, and that's why I do view them as a contender. I do have a second ACC team in here, Shaun, and they are a dark horse for me, and they're at the bottom of my dark horse list, but I do think they need mention, and that's Miami. And here's the recipe for Miami, in my opinion. I think the upgrade at defensive coordinator is going to benefit them. I think they play a schedule that is good enough this season to get in at 10-2, whereas last season it didn't. 10-2 last year hurt them. If they're 10-2 this year and they lose 2 conference games at the end of the season like they did this year, they're going to have wins over Notre Dame and Florida in the non-conference. If they go 10-2 this year but lose to one of those 2 teams, then they're in the ACC title game, which gets them in. And for them to get to that point, it means Carson Beck has to be better than I think he is. It means that their offensive line and defensive lines are what people think they will be. Because to me, a veteran quarterback who's good and 2 really good lines is a great formula to being a championship caliber football team. Then the big question is, A, is Mario Cristobal a good enough coach to get him there? And then number 2, do they have enough skill talent to get there? That's the big question for me with Miami. Is I don't know that I love their skill talent outside of running back. If that's as good as what some Miami people think it is, I do have them as a dark horse because there's going to be in my opinion, I think we're going to, part of the reason like Trev and I differ on Miami this year is I don't disagree with a lot of the issues he sees with Mario Cristobal and skill talent, but I just have always found that there comes a level of consistency that you get when you're really good in the trenches on both sides of the ball. And I do think they're going to be good on so then if their skill talent's better than expected, that's how all of a sudden Miami kind of has that where'd they come from moment in the ACC. And because their schedule is challenging, but not incredibly overwhelming in conference, I think they can, as long as they can split with Notre Dame and Florida, if they're 10-2 at the end of the regular season, they're playing in the ACC title game, which I think has them in a pretty good position to make to the college football playoff. And then now it's like, okay, now let your talent take over. So they are a dark horse for me. Let's go Big 12, Shaun. I don't have any top contenders on here, but I have 2 dark horses. Do you have anybody from the Big 12 on your list? If so, let's talk about it.
Arizona State is definitely there. Texas Tech has been getting a lot of love. And I love Coach McGuire. I really do. I think he's a really good coach. And they've been doing their thing in the portal and definitely have invested to improve their recruiting. But I'm very interested in, I think Arizona State is right under. I think they're a dark horse for me. I wouldn't put Texas Tech as much love as they're getting. I don't know if I'm ready to commit, but Iowa State is another team that I think bears watching this year because they were right there until that loss at home into Texas Tech, which kind of seemed to like start the kind of descent because they had, the young quarterback, he was buzzing, he was making plays. They had the 2 wide receivers that were killing, making plays. They had an underrated tight end group, and their defense, that 3-3-5, they were all over the place. And then Texas Tech just came in and just lined up and just physically just ran the ball right at them and kept their offense off the field and got enough stops on defense in the red zone and ended up pulling out the game. And after that, they weren't able to recover. And I think because when you're like that, more than likely in order for you to get into the playoff, you're going to have to be near perfect because you're Iowa State and you're trying to get to that Big 12 championship game. And for some reason, I guess it was almost like Texas Tech showed everybody else, this is how you beat them. And then after that, every game just seemed to get tougher. Then they had some tough injuries after that as well that made things back. But, they have Beck back. I don't know if their young wide receivers are going to be as prolific as the guys they lost to the NFL, but they definitely have an elite coach. Like I like Matt Campbell.
He's a very good coach.
He's a very good coach, right? So
he's in his right element.
Yeah,
like, I think he thrives in that type of place where he can find those blue collar, hard a lot. I mean, his roster's filled with a bunch of Matt Campbells, just not highly ranked prospects, all these different things. Just there's talent there, but we're a team. We work together. We play hard. We're well coached and all those type of things. I actually don't have Iowa State on my list because I don't know that. I don't think they were a title contender last year. I think they got a little bit exposed as not being on that level by Arizona State. Now, one game doesn't always mean that you're not a good team, but
those are 2 dark horses I had.
Was Iowa State and Arizona State?
Yeah, I don't have anybody from the Big 12 as like a contender, but they are dark
same.
horses.
I don't nobody top contender. They're both dark horses. I don't have Iowa State on mine at all. Like even dark horse. I just don't see the overall talent. Losing a couple 1,000-yard receivers. I don't think they were there last year. I think that they're going to be a good team. They're going to be a top 4 to 5 Big 12 team, but I don't think they could even win the Big 12. But if they get there, that will be them maximizing their potential as a program is getting to the playoff, which I think they're capable of doing. I just don't think they have the playmakers. And that's kind of where Arizona State is for me, is they do have a quarterback capable of, Rocco Beck's a nice college football player. I just don't think he's got the playmaking potential that Sam Leavitt has. Now, I would argue Rocco Beck was a better quarterback than Sam Leavitt was last year. But I think Sam Leavitt's going to be a better player this year. But more so, Sam Leavitt has more playmaking ability than I think Rocco Beck has. But getting Jordan Tyson back, getting the Army transfer at running back with some talented kids they have coming back. They've got a ton coming back in their offensive line. That's returns more intact than Iowa State's does. I think Arizona State has a little bit more athleticism on defense. I think Iowa State had some really key losses on defense last year. I just don't have them there. But you also kind of like, do I really want to just completely write off Matt Campbell of surprising me? I just think they're just – I don't know that they can win 4 or 3, and that's where I'm at. I do think Arizona State potentially could. They're a dark horse. Here's my surprise team in the Big 12, Shaun. I have Kansas State as my dark horse, and here's why. They have as dynamic of a backfield as you're going to have in college football this year at quarterback and running back. There aren't many teams that have 2 athletes as just explosive as Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards. There's a reason Notre Dame wanted both of those guys when they were coming out of high school. Elite level athletes, in my opinion. And J.C. Brown at wide receiver is explosive. That is the most explosive trio in the Big 12. I think their offensive line has a chance to be pretty good. It's all going to come down to can their defense figure it out. Because when you've got the kind of dynamic athleticism that they have on offense, I say that's the kind of team that if they get hot in the postseason, they could go on a run similar to what Texas or TCU did a couple years ago with what they had at running back, Max Duggan at quarterback, and then, of course, Quentin Johnson at wide receiver. They had legit athletes that you could go toe-to-toe with a Michigan and say, we're not afraid of you because we can run. And that's why K-State is on my list. I'm not buying the Texas Tech hype. I got to, if a portal team is going to finally compete for a championship, it's not going to be Texas Tech. It's going to be somebody else. Could they get to the playoff? Sure. Shaun, there's 7-8 teams that could win the Big 12 this year and get to the playoff. But who are the ones capable of getting there and then doing something with it? And that's why I have K-State there. It's that dynamic ability on offense that has me with them on my list. Am I completely nuts for that?
No, because I love Avery Johnson. But like you, I just wonder about the defense. And I wonder about the depth. With programs like that, I wonder about the defense, the depth, injuries, everything has to go right. You know, it's a long shot.
You said it, though. You just said it. Everything has to go right.
Yeah.
For K, O-line's got to be legit. They got to stay healthy. The defense has to figure it out. I mean, they can't be a team that loses 5-6 starters to injury and they're going to go out there and win. I mean, they're not. You said it perfectly correct. Everything's got to go right. But I said this, and this is kind of what I did about the Big 12. I took the top 7 teams, and I said, if everything goes right, can this team win 3 games? Because I think if everything goes right, you're 12-0, 11-1, and you're getting a bye. So you don't got to win 4. That's part of it going right for you. Who can win 3 games? And really the only 2 that I looked at that had the athleticism and the line potential and the coaching, because Chris Kleiman's a guy that has experience winning 3-4 games to win a championship. He understands what that's like, having won multiple championships at North Dakota State. I say that's a team that to me has that ability. Plus dynamic athletes. I think that's where they're on there for me.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Before the recent events out in Utah, with BYU, if they had the quarterback coming back?
No, I'm not a big fan of his.
Okay.
This has nothing to do with – I've said this before. I think he's a gamer. I think he's very limited. He's like a poor man's Craig Krenzel. Not as athletic, doesn't throw as well as Craig Krenzel, but kind of brings that gamer type of thing that Krenzel brought to that 2002 Ohio State team. Just not as good. I also don't think losing him is going to be as big of a loss. I think they're still going to be a really good football team. My issue with BYU is more about when they get to that, I could see BYU getting in and maybe winning a game, but the deeper they get in and the more they're matched up against the athletes on the perimeter that they're going to have to face, that's where they're going to struggle. When they get to the semifinals, for example, or the quarterfinals, for example, assuming that they don't get a bye. If they get a bye and they get the right matchup, could they win and get to the semis? And based on what we said at the beginning, doesn't that make him a contender? Sort of, but I'm breaking my rule here because that's more of it. You lucked out, kind of like you got that proper bye. You're the 5 seed, but you're playing the 12 seed whose quarterback is out or something. I mean, who knows what it could be? Or you're the 4 seed and then you're playing the 5 seed whose quarterback got injured in the first. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen, but when you get to the semis and now those teams can match up with you in the trenches and toughness and coaching, but they're going to way out athlete you on the perimeter, you're going to struggle.
This might sound crazy, because we talked about teams that love being in certain positions. Like, man, a coach like Matt Campbell loves being in this position. That Utah program likes being forgotten too.
And they have a dynamic quarterback as well.
Yeah,
Devin
yeah,
Dampier is going to be really
yeah,
interesting to watch this
yeah.
year.
That coach
Yeah.
staff and program, they like being under the radar because they're going to be physical. They're going to play tough defense, and like you said, if they have enough playmakers, they can make some noise in the Big 12.
We'll see. I mean, we've been talking about Tobias Merriweather having a breakout for a while. Does it come this year, Utah? And that would help. That would help a lot. But those are my Big 12 teams. I do think Utah is going to have a bounce back year. I don't know that they go from what they were last year to being able to win 3-4 games in the postseason. They're not on my list, but they are going to be a team that makes some noise in the Big 12 this year. Last year was an anomaly, in my opinion. That's not who that program is. So it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of go. So let's go to the Big Ten, Shaun. First of all, how many teams do you have in the Big Ten between top contenders and dark horses?
I wanted to take my pom-poms, but I thought better of myself.
You can do it.
I wanted to get my pom-poms out like, yeah. No, I'm going to go with – I got 2 top-tier teams in the Big Ten. I had 2. I got one that's right there because I think they truly have made the right moves and additions in the portal to go ahead and improve on what they did last year. Mm-hmm. But I'm sitting right at Ohio State and Penn State. They're just
you're only going 2?
I'm only going 2. I know who they are. I know what they bring. If I would love to see a schedule that doesn't have them pitted against each other, so they meet in the Big Ten championship game, because I think it would be absolutely amazing.
In a non-rematch?
In a non-rematch, yeah. But unfortunately, it's not going to happen that way. Just Ohio State, Penn State for me. Too many uncertainties. Yeah, I could throw Oregon in there. That's too many uncertainties for me. Nah. No, because we're talking about not just winning. We're talking about guys that can make a run. I need a track record to show me. I need something to show me. You just lost your number 1 receiver in the spring, unfortunately. Got a brand new quarterback. The offensive line, you lost a couple of cogs. And the defense, your defense is what failed you. So all of this speed and front 4, they got exposed.
They're not disciplined.
Yeah, it's like
they're turning guys. They didn't get blown out by Ohio State, Shaun, because they just don't have the athletes, and they were just turning guys loose. They were just blown coverage. I mean, you're just running free, not even – it's like jogging into the end zone because they're not disciplined. That's how he runs his program, and that's a concern for me. So let's talk about the Buckeyes and Penn State, because I definitely want to talk about Oregon. I have them on my list, but I want to have a conversation about it because I think you and I probably agree about a lot of things with them. Let's talk about the Buckeyes and Penn State first, Shaun. Obviously, Ohio State, defending national champs. Yes, they lost a lot. Yes, the path is going to be tough this year. The schedule is not easy. But, folks, this is not what Michigan went through in 2023, where when Michigan lost all those vets, they had some studs at the top, but there was a big drop-off in the roster after the top 5 or 6. Plus, they dealt with all those injuries, and they had no quarterback to speak of, no quarterback. Ohio State's turned into Julian Sand. Yes, he's inexperienced, but he's very talented. They're still going to have the best receiving room in America. They should still be at least solid on the offensive line, and they won a title last year with an offensive line that was a hot mess most of the season. I mean, they just did. Yes, they lose some excellent players up front. A lot of talented young players coming in, stepping in for it. They lose Cody Simon. It's a big loss. They did a great job of getting Arvell Reese legitimate playing time as part of a rotation last year, like Notre Dame has done, like did last year. I think Arvell Reese is going to step in, and he'll make more mistakes than Cody Simon made because he's younger, but I think he's going to make a lot of plays, and their secondary is still going to be outstanding. I didn't think Denzel Burke was that good last year. I thought he had a big senior slump, and he was banged up a lot too. I think they're actually going to be better cornerback this year than they were last year. Safety, they're going to be big time. This is still a really talented football team. Now, Ryan Day's got a lot to prove. I have some questions about some of the coaching moves they made. That's why they're a little bit of a concern for me. But at the end of the day, Ohio State's consistent. I mean, they're 11 wins every year. They're going to be in the playoff. And if they get there, if they're good enough to get there, then they're good enough to win it, in my opinion. So they're on my list. Let's talk about the Nittany Lions, Shaun. You have them as a top contender or a dark horse contender?
No, I have them as a top contender.
Let's talk about why. Tell me why.
Because I do, as much as we lament what we saw late against Notre Dame from Drew Aller, as much as we lament him not being able to make certain throws, he has a big arm physically, but just certain throws just seems like he won't pull the trigger and he makes bad decisions in big situations. I do think I believe in his character. I think he's a tough-minded young man. I really do. And I think he's a really good leader. I love their offensive line. I think their offensive line is going to be just as good, if not better, than it was last year. We already know the running back room, what they bring. They have just as much rich history at the tight end position in recent history than as Notre Dame does. And so offensively, and just it's going to be about
Shaun, Luke Reynolds is really good.
Yes, he is.
Like, no, he's not Tyler Watson or Tyler Watson.
He's not Tyler Eifert. Tyler Warren.
Yes.
We're messing up all the time.
But he's really good. Like, they're going to be good there. They don't have to be what they were last year at tight end. They're going to be good there.
No.
He's a good football player.
And have they done enough at wide receiver? We'll see. But I think, because we had this discussion, the wide receiver is very much locked into Drew Aller, in my opinion. Can he become that guy? Because they're good enough to go ahead and win games and out-talent a lot of teams. But can he be in a different way? Because he's not about to line up like Riley and just use his legs to make plays. Can he make plays in key situations in big games to get them over the hump? That's what it's going to come down to, right? Because always with James Franklin and his program has always been those big games, those big moments. They're not able to make the plays. Even in the Big Ten championship game, they were right there with Oregon. Right, Oregon will punch him in the mouth, and you're like, okay, Penn State's about to fold, and nope,
they didn't.
They come right back at Oregon, and so
Notre Dame was on the verge of rolling them off the field in the second half last year, and then they denied. Dennis Sutton steps up and makes that big play, and they go down to 4, and they exactly.
Yeah. And so it's small things like that that give you a belief, like, okay, maybe they have turned the corner as far as character in the program to say, okay, they've kind of steadied the ship. And now they're getting ready to go ahead and back up what they did last year. So I do think.
I mean, are the questions about James Franklin any different than the questions we had last year about Ryan Day, other than Ryan Day just had more talented teams? I mean, Ryan Day's been dominated by Michigan in his tenure as head coach. He has, lost to Kirby. Yeah, they were close, but they lost. Some questionable decisions in the end of that game. Play calling wise on that last drive that didn't allow them to go down to get in legitimate field goal range. You look at the getting out coached at home by Oregon and Mario Cristobal in 2021, start of that season. There are certainly some things you say, like, can he really win the big game where the other team has as much talent as he does? I think that's fair, because the only big-time program he'd consistently beat was Penn State. I mean, the two Notre Dame teams he beat weren't great teams. But then what did he do? He righted the ship and got his team to go out there and play their best football in the postseason, beat Oregon convincingly, beat Tennessee convincingly, beat Texas in a great game, and then beat Notre Dame in a game where they trailed after the first drive and then scored and never trailed again after that. So you're always that guy till you prove you aren't, right? I mean, that's kind of the thing that coaches get knocked for, and then all of a sudden can't win. Oh, he won now, finally. So I think that's why Penn State, you got to say, yeah, this is what's going to make it. This is the roadblocks, but you can't look at that roster with who I ranked as the number one returning offensive line in the country with a top 10 returning defensive line. They just hired the D coordinator that just won a title and built Jim Knowles inherited a train wreck of a defense at Ohio State, and within year 2 had them rolling on defense, and year 3 won a title. He's walking into a way better situation at Penn State because Tom Allen left a good foundation of talent and coaching. So he doesn't have to turn things around at Penn State the way he did at Ohio State, where there was a culture problem on defense he had to fix. Like, you're walking into a good situation here. So I just look at Penn State and I say, are there stumbling blocks? Drew Aller's got to prove he can make those big-time throws. James Franklin's got to show he won't make those big mistakes, but those aren't hard fixes, guys. Those are him hiring someone that he trusts to be in his ear to say, hey, coach, we may not want to run a draw on 4th and 5 against Ohio State, when we got a chance to win this game. And in a lot of those years that they were getting beat by Ohio State, they weren't getting killed, guys. They're not out there losing by 40 every year to Ohio State. They're down to the wire. They can't win the game. It just takes that one year, that one right team that can kind of right the ship and say, hey, let's figure this out. So I think they belong in there. I do have Oregon in there, Shaun, and I disagree with absolutely nothing you said. Nothing. I just feel like with the talent they do have, they are a team that can get hot. And I think there's something to be said for that. Ohio State was a very flawed team in the regular season last year. Very flawed. Almost lost to Penn State. Got beat by a mediocre at best Michigan team. Should have lost to Nebraska. Made some coaching decisions to get them beat by Oregon. But when they got hot, when they righted the ship in the playoffs, that team looked nothing like the one in the regular season. I just think Oregon has the talent to do that. I love Will Stein as an OC. I got questions about how their defense is coordinated, but they've got really talented players on the D-line. They've got talented players in the O-line. I don't know if it's going to come together. And they got a quarterback that can absolutely sling the football. Now, he's not the runner the other guys were, and I'm curious how they're going to respond to that. But I think they've got the talent that if they can somewhat make some adjustments from a program culture standpoint, because like when you ask me what moments define how a program is run, when I think of what if I could pick one moment that tells me this is why Dan Lanning's program is the way that it is, it's him jumping to the swimming pool with the defensive lineman that he, you know what I mean? Like, you're a very undisciplined coach who cares more about, like, it seems like having the cool Twitter moments than you do about building a disciplined, smart, sound football team. It's all flash for you, and flash doesn't win championships. I think substance does, but that's something that can be fixed. And if he does address it, then this team becomes dangerous. They're at they're third of my 3 Big Ten teams, but I do think they at least belong on there because if he does correct some of those things, I do think they have a roster to get hot and make a run in the playoffs. With that being said, nothing you said I disagree with. I agree with all of it, which is why I don't think they're going to win it. But when I look at that roster, I say, if they can fix this, this, and this, that roster can go. And that's where I'm at with Oregon and why I'm on there. Any counterpoints you want to make to that?
No, I'm pulling for my boy Dante Moore. I am pulling for him.
I like Dante. I don't like his dad, Dante, but I like Dante a lot.
Yeah, I want him to have a really successful season. Like you said,
that kid didn't forget how to throw the football, folks.
Man.
I mean, even just look at some of the throws he made at UCLA 2 years ago. He still knows how to throw the football.
Yeah, and I think there is something. You talk about the Wisconsin game to the Penn State Big Ten championship game to ultimately, debacle that was the Rose Bowl for Oregon. You start to see, if you go back and watch those games, because I remember watching that game in the middle of the third quarter up at Camp Randall, like, why is this game even close? Wisconsin is playing with their third string quarterback right now. Like this,
who could not complete a pass?
Yeah, like
10 yards.
What is going on? And you just start to see things kind of frayed at the edges for the operation of what they were doing. Then they go to the Big Ten championship game, and the offense is clicking. They're just as explosive, but defensively, they couldn't stop Penn State, and Penn State was able to do basically whatever they wanted. And then you go to that Rose Bowl, and it was like you thought the time off would give them a chance to get things back. And it seems like they just couldn't ever get things back on the track.
They were woefully unprepared for that.
They were derailed. Absolutely. So
woefully unprepared for that game.
Yeah, I don't, man. Just I worry about the operation when things get tough. See, that's what I'm talking about. That right there
That's
is a
fair.
moment.
Yeah.
They had a similar testing of the character of the program as Ohio State did late in the season. And the character of Ohio State was shown through, and who that team was, that Oregon team was, came to the forefront in that Rose Bowl. Yep. Like when they got down early, they had the character of that team could have come forth and said, no. We're gonna get this back together and make this a game against Ohio State. And they let the rope go.
When you aren't prepared, when your coaching staff doesn't prepare you mentally and schematically and fundamentally, there is no let's right the ship during a game. Ohio State righted the ship in the preparation between Michigan and Tennessee. Oregon went into that game unprepared, which is just wild to me, and just quit. I mean, honestly, you watch them play, like those guys quit. Like, no, Ohio State no mossed 2 teams in the playoff last year. Let's not forget about that. Tennessee had a bunch of dudes like, oh, my hammy in the second half of that game. Late first half of that game. That guy's, Shaun, opting out in the middle of the game. Tennessee did. And I think Oregon did too. They're like, yeah, I'm out. Yeah, I'm out. I quit. I'm not putting any more effort in this. We're getting killed. And, yeah, there's no doubt about that. So let's finish up with the SEC and then the other, Shaun. How many teams do you have on your list as title contenders, whether they're top contenders or dark horses from the SEC this season? Because I'm struggling with my total answer on this one.
I do think Indiana can improve on what they did.
You think they can win it all, though?
We're talking about if they can get hot. I think what they bring back defensively, I really like. The additions they made in the portal. And once again, I do think they can manage. I think they can sneak into the Big Ten championship game. I think
that's true. Yeah.
I think they can sneak into the Big Ten championship game.
I think they can get back to the playoffs, Shaun. We talked about that before. I think they have a shot to get to the play. I think Illinois has a shot to get to the playoff.
Yeah.
I think Iowa has a dark horse shot to get to the playoff.
Especially with the addition at quarterback.
Yep.
If they can Iowa's always a quarterback away. They're always a quarterback away. So you're right. You're spot on with Iowa. But I do believe, I don't think Indiana's a fluke as a program. I just don't. I don't. I think they still have a ways to go. I don't know if they're going to come back and run it back the same way as they did last year. But I do think if they get hot and they can sneak into the Big Ten championship game and win that and get a bye, I think, they would have a chance to, let me be honest. A dark horse to win it all.
That's where we're like, to me, Shaun, there's a lot of Big Ten teams that are dark horses to get to the college football playoff. I think Iowa, I mentioned, Illinois, Indiana, I think Nebraska, I think Washington, I think Michigan State, like the darkest of dark horses. But none of those teams have a shot to win 3-4 games.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And it would be 3 if you can somehow beat Ohio State, Penn State, or Oregon in the Big Ten title game. You don't have to win 3. But even then, it's like, no, I can't see them winning. Like, could I see Indiana upsetting someone in the first round? Yes. Can I see it going further than that? No. Like let's say they play a team like they travel up and have to play a 6 seed next year or something like that. Okay, great. Could they beat that team? Sure, it's possible. Especially now with a situation where it's a true 6 seed, as opposed to last year they played the 7 seed, who was actually the number 5 team in Notre Dame. But because of the Arizona State and Boise getting bumped up, and then Notre Dame gets bumped down. Like now, it's like if you're the 11, you're playing the 6, not seed. You're playing the 6th ranked team now, and so I think that gives them a better chance to have an upset win. But you're not going to win let's say somehow they upset Notre Dame this year. They're not beating Notre Dame and Georgia. That's my point. You may have that one. Everything went right. We won a game, but you're not good enough, in my opinion. You don't have the talent, in my opinion, to win 3 or 4. That's true for those teams. It's true for Michigan. It's true for Michigan State. It's true for Washington. Because here's the unfortunate thing for Washington State or Washington. Past the first round, you don't get to play at home anymore. And that team is a very different team away from home than they were home last year.
So let me clarify, because I think I misunderstood where we were going after we did the first 2 teams. Oregon would be just by default. They're not right there with Penn State and Ohio State for me, but they're right under that.
Yeah.
Oregon can get hot and win a national championship.
I'd put them as a dark horse.
Right?
I think it's fair to call them a dark horse since they haven't proven they can win like even a postseason game.
Yeah.
But I do think it's fair to I'd call them. I don't put them on the level as Ohio State. And I agree with you on that.
I'll pull my pom-poms out for a second. I do think this year in particular, I do think Illinois is right there with Indiana. But you know something else? Michigan is sneaky. Let me tell you why Michigan is sneaky. If they do get decent quarterback play, now still, who's going to catch the ball? Who's going to get open? That's a really big question.
And I don't think their offensive line's as good this year either.
Well, man, I mean, going back to what level they played offensive line 2 years ago, to be
I don't even think it's as good as last year. I don't even think it's going to be as good as 2020.
But the offensive line at the end of the year was one of their strengths offensively, but almost by default because it had no choice.
But compared to what?
But, you know, if they can find a way to be in the mix with Ohio State coming to them, you say what you want to say. Ohio State has one more hurdle, and it is that game on that last Saturday in November. It's that game. And for some reason, let's say Michigan is a game behind Ohio State in the standings going into that game. It's like, and we're talking about Michigan sneaking into the Big Ten champ. The Big Ten for me is going to be, and we haven't even mentioned USC, which is another team from a talent standpoint that you can honestly sit back and say, if everything goes right with their talent, could they make a run? Probably not. You might give them 1 or 2 games. You might even give them a dark horse chance of getting to the playoffs. But I think that's what's so dope about, I think the Big Ten is going to be really dope this year. I really do.
It's a lot deeper than it was last year. It was
really
very top-heavy league last year.
I really do. Right. And I think teams like, we talked about this. I forget what the topic was, but we talked about this maybe a couple of shows ago. We talked about the fact that the middle of that Big Ten, man, there's some teams that I think jump up and bite you. I think Michigan State is ascending.
Was not the case.
We both love the quarterback at Purdue.
Last year.
We both love the quarterback at Purdue, what he can do, the playmaker he is.
Minnesota should have a legit run game this year. I'm telling you, man, I could be way wrong, Sean, but I like this Michigan State team. I do. Not to be like win a title, but like just a sneaky good team. Nebraska's going to be better. Washington's going to be better. I think USC is going to be better. I think Minnesota will be a solid team this year. I mean, like
anybody from that group jumping into your dark horse?
No, not to win it all. No. Like none of those teams have the ability to win more than 2 in the playoffs. Like I don't see it. And I think most can only win 1, if any. Like and that's the difference between like the Big 12. I had a list of 2 teams. I think there's like 8 teams that could win the Big 12. But just winning it doesn't, like if Iowa State gets into the playoff last year, they get crushed by Texas because I don't think they match up very well with Texas. And that's part of it is I just don't think any of those teams have a shot to win it all. Could they get into the playoff? Absolutely. Could any of them go on a run? I just don't think they have the horses to do so. Like that's just where I'm at when I break this down. I didn't even think Wisconsin might be better than they were last year. Their record may not reflect it because their schedule.
They just need to be healthy.
Yeah.
They need to stay healthy. The last 2 years.
They're going to run a system that's more geared towards what they should have been running to begin with.
Yeah.
So, Shaun, let's go to the SEC. I have 3 top contenders in the SEC, and then I have 2 teams that I have as potential dark horses that I want to talk to you about. Let's start off with the top contenders. How many top contenders from the SEC do you have as like teams that you say this is a team that has a legitimate chance to win a championship?
I'm interested. Texas is my number one. I just think, look, they've been knocking on the door. We'll find out, because I don't think talent has been the issue, especially at the skill positions. That hasn't been the issue. Their talent on defense, their line play on both sides of the ball. I don't think they played Ohio State the toughest one could say out of anybody that Ohio State faced in the playoffs. I mean, they were
not
right
even close.
They're on the 1 yard line, but
not even close.
Tied up. I mean,
that's why final scores can be very misleading, Shaun, because Notre Dame played Texas tougher if you just look at the final score. This is what was so dumb about some of the logic that BK used about, well, we played Alabama tougher than Ohio State did. Nonsense. That was toe-to-toe, back and forth. The spread was, in the final minute, they ran a 4th down play to try to tie it that got fumbled and ran back. Whereas you scored late to make it an 11-point game. So final score doesn't always tell you who played tougher. They beat Texas by more than they beat Notre Dame, but the Texas game was far more competitive start to finish than Notre Dame game was. By halftime in the Notre Dame game, you're like, it's going to need a miracle to come back. And props to Notre Dame for battling back, and we talked about this before. Ohio State offensively did take their foot off the gas a little bit after going up 31-7. That game was far more competitive than the championship game was, in my opinion. So I agree with you on that.
Let me tell you something, man. They are knocking on the door, and we'll find out, right? Because this is 2 close losses with a chance to win or tie the game. The year before, it was to Washington. They're right there with a chance to go ahead and win the game. They don't get it done. They come right back. They don't get it done against Ohio State. So was it Quinn Ewers not being able to make the play or make the plays? That's low-hanging fruit. That's easy. Well, okay, we just switch out Quinn for Arch. Arch is a better quarterback. He'll make the difference. But we're going to find out a lot about the program, the head coach, and the players, right? Because there are a lot of players, talented players, 5-star top 100 players that are on their roster that sat there waiting on that opportunity to say, hey, I don't know anything. Like you said earlier, I don't know anything about that Washington loss. It wasn't me. I don't know anything about that Ohio State loss. Wasn't me. It's my turn now, right? And so now we get to see, who this program really is, who they really are, because I think they have a hurdle to face. And I don't know if that hurdle is necessarily.
I think it's internal.
That's good. I was about to say, I don't know if it's actually a team or something, like you said, internal.
You could say it's Georgia, but I don't think it's actually Georgia.
I don't think it's Georgia.
It's an internal problem that makes Georgia a bad matchup for them. And it's why they also could not convert on the 1st and goal from the 1 against Ohio State. It's an internal problem, not necessarily an external problem, right? Like, I don't think Ohio State is losing to Michigan every year because Michigan just has a better team. There's a cultural problem at Ohio State that has not been addressed and wasn't even addressed last year because it didn't get addressed at all until after Michigan beat them. That has led to there's a lack of toughness in Columbus that Michigan exposes. It's not necessarily Michigan specific. And I think for Texas, you have an internal problem that Georgia was able to expose, that Ohio State was able to expose, that I think Notre Dame would have exposed, that you can address because it's a you problem, not a matchup problem. It's within your control. So I agree with that. And that's why I also have Texas as a top contender. They're actually my number 2. Yeah. They're my number 2. And I'll tell you who my number 1 is, Shaun. My number 1 of my top contenders in the SEC is Alabama. And look, I know that Alabama had a down year last year. I think there was a lot of reasons for that. There were some culture problems in that program that I think are now gone. There was a incredible miscast or misfit between the quarterback and the offensive coaching. I think getting Ryan Grubbs back is big for that program. I think the guys that are still there are bought in. It's still a very talented roster. Getting Isaiah Horton completes that receiving core. You had one elite guy in Ryan Williams, a really nice, shifty, complimentary player in Jeremy Bernard, but now you need that big guy in the boundary. And you look at it and say, okay, you've got that now in Isaiah Horton. Your offensive line should be one of the 10 best. I think there's debate. Are they like 7-9 or 1-3? That's up for debate, but it's still top 10. I think their D-line is big and physical. I think they're going to be better against the run this year. I think they got rid of some ego attitude issues off the defense last year. Got some talented players coming back. They're still a talented roster going into year 2 of the system. So I really like this Alabama team, and I don't need Ty Simpson to be great. Everyone's like, I need to see Ty Simpson first. That's fine. He just needs to not suck. Like he's just your job is to get the ball to the playmakers. That's your job. And if he's not good enough to do that, then they're going to put in a stud, either Austin Mack or Keelan Russell, and then you roll with that. So I think Alabama is the team for me in the Big 12 or in the SEC because number one, the coach at Alabama has proven to me that he can beat the coach at Texas on a big stage with a less talented roster. He has shown he can go win some of those big games. He's beat Dan Lanning. He's beat Steve Sarkisian, got them to a title game 2 years ago at Washington. And I just think going into year 2, that they're gonna be better fit to the system now because of some of the pieces they've been able to kind of replace and bring in and things like that. I also think that I have more faith that Alabama is going to be good in the trenches than I do that Texas is going to be good in the trenches this year. And that's why because like you look at Alabama, they're like they didn't lose to Oklahoma because they didn't have talent to beat Oklahoma. They lost to Oklahoma because that team had no leadership, terrible culture. Can all that get fixed in a year? We'll find out. But I think they had a lot of addition by subtraction this offseason. I really do. And and as part of this, I have a bias towards Kalen DeBoer based on what he's done at previous places. That I think in year 2 he's going to get. They're going to take a big jump, and I think they're going to be a little bit more balanced. But I think they have a quarterback now that's going to be better to get the ball. Like guys, if you go break Alabama's film down last year, Shaun, I know you've done this. We've talked about this. There are so many of those games that they lost where they have receivers wide open, just wide open. And the quarterback either couldn't read it or couldn't hit it. And you're like, you give me just a solid talent at quarterback that's smart, and they win that game, and they win that game, and they probably win that game. Like that's how I feel about Alabama and their 4 losses last year. I think the only game where I'd say they got beat, and I don't know that you can put that on the quarterback is the Oklahoma game, because I think the whole team quit in that game. Like they didn't want to be there. And Vanderbilt, you could kind of put on the quarterback. I think that's also partly on the defense, but like the Tennessee game, you give them a quarterback that knows how to complete basic reads and completions, like in that system, that they win that game. So that's why I have them on a different level than I did last year. They're my number 1. Are they on your top contenders list, Shaun?
They are.
Okay.
They are.
Who else do you have?
You know me. I'm a Kirby Smart fan, bro. It's like you can say what you want. I don't believe in this. I don't believe in that. They're not as talented and not this. And they just find a way, right? If they get past Notre Dame last year, they match up with Penn State. I don't know if they beat Penn State, but I'm like, they're probably in the game. I don't think Penn State routes them. They're just always going to be there as a program. So for me, that makes them a contender. Yes, I think they can make it to the SEC championship. And if they get in there, I think they can win 2 to 3 games. I just believe in the culture. I believe in the character of the program. And I believe in Kirby Smart. So I got Texas, I got Alabama, I have Georgia. Those are my top 3 teams. Probably sounds redundant.
I'm with you on Georgia. Look, I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year. They're still Georgia. They're still fix this, and then you're kind of rolling. And so I think you'd be foolish to just write them off as not a legitimate title contender. I do think they're the third title contender in the SEC.
Yeah, they're third for me as well.
But they're still a title contender. Let's talk about some other teams that you have in the SEC. Who else? Do you have any other top contenders, or the rest of yours dark horses?
Dark horses. I'll tell you why.
Let's talk about. Let's take one at a time. Who's the first one you want to talk about?
I want to talk about A&M.
Okay,
I do. A&M.
I got them on mine.
A&M, they were like leading the SEC deep into the October, and then Marcel Reed. I know you're not a big Marcel Reed fan, but I do think Marcel Reed is going to be a better quarterback than he was last year.
He fits the system.
Fits the system. Yes,
that's why A&M right there. You're going to see it. A&M right there on my list.
Yeah,
they don't need him to be a stud in year 2, Shaun.
No. And I think Elko he's one of those coaches with great character. No matter where he goes, you see the growth in the program. Even if they have some setbacks or they go through some testings, you're going to see the growth. Is that growth going to come in September in South Bend? I don't think so. But I think that's going to be something that's very necessary for them to take those in steps going into the actual SEC schedule. And I do see them, I think at the end of the year, you got a true test of where they were. Because even though they tried to come back against Texas pretty much controlled that game. Texas controlled the game. They didn't have the horses. You didn't have
Le'Veon Moss.
Yeah. So I think that was like a true litmus test of what a program is. And I think they're still probably a year away from being like in that top level of contenders. But I do think dark horse have a chance. They get in there. They probably can make a run. If everything goes right, they can get a big win here or there. Because like most SEC schools, the schedule is the schedule. Like you got tough games, right? 2 or 3, probably 3 to 4 tough games. And then it's about winning the certain matchups to see if you can get into that championship game. So Texas A&M is one. I thought about South Carolina. Go ahead.
Let's stay on A&M for a second, because I think that also too is having a quarterback that fits this. Colin Klein showed me something last year, and that is he doesn't really know how to call an offense without a quarterback that fits his style. And Marcel Reed, I think, fits his style. Well, he had Marcel Reed last year. Yeah, but they clearly were trying to gear the offense towards Connor Wegman during the offseason and then had to adjust on the fly, had some injuries, and they faded down the stretch. I think now that it's Marcel Reed's team, you're more suited to say, okay, now they've built it around him, the running backs, the big offensive line, and then you went out and got some – I don't think the receivers fit his system at all either. He didn't know how to use big, tall receivers. He's always thrived with those little, quick, shifty guys, and now he's got a bunch of those. And so I think the talent is more geared towards what he can do well. The big question for me with them is still Jay Bateman. Like, this is a team that needs everything to go right. They do. They need everything to go right. They need to catch some breaks and all that. But if they get hot in the postseason, I do think they're a team capable of going on a run. I do.
I'm going to go Ole Miss, man. Because first of all, I like the quarterback. They do lose a lot, especially from defense, pass rushing. Lost some talented players, even in the secondary. But they're just always – they can win. Beating Georgia is one thing. It's like the head scratcher. Can they get rid of the head scratchers every year? Can they get rid of the Kentuckys? Can they get rid of that game? Right? This can be another one of those programs that has a program-defining season or a program-defining win. You thought they had that against Georgia, right? They couldn't follow it up, which shows you the program is not necessarily ready to handle success.
It's not mature enough to handle success.
And it's very much a connection to what you just talked about with Oregon. Mm-hmm. Like the maturity, how they operate starts at the top, right? And hopefully you think and hope, man, can this head coach finally mature? Can he get off Twitter or X or social media ranting and complaining and actually right the ship and become more consistent as a program. Because you thought and you knew being at Ole Miss, they probably can't recruit with Georgia. They probably can't recruit with Texas A&M. But now they got the transfer portal. Maybe that closes the gap a little bit for Lane Kiffin, especially defensively. And it's like, it doesn't matter how much more talent they get. If the character of the program is the character of the program, then you're just going to go from, exceeding expectations to being underwhelming with the talent that you have. And so, but I still hold out hope that, because I think that Ole Miss team last year, if they had snuck in, they were talented enough to win 2 or 3 games in the playoffs. And I think that remains the same. It's just a matter of whether or not the program can mature, grow up a little bit.
I don't think they can, because I don't think he's capable of that. I mean, we're not talking about saying, like, here's a big difference, right? When you look at like Dan Lanning, he's got to grow up as a coach. Like, he still acts like a coordinator that's a head coach.
Yeah.
Rah guy. I'm cool. Let me smoke cigars because I flipped the recruit. Like, nah, bro, that ain't it. Smoke a cigar when you beat somebody good. You did that against Ohio State. Well, then you had to do it again and you got embarrassed. But like, Dan Lanning's also still a very young football coach. He's 39 years old right now. He's still, which in coaching is young. Lane Kiffin's 50. He is who he is. And I just don't know that he's ever capable of having that team. Like, Lane could this is what Lane could do. He could get in, win that upset, go on the road in week 1 of the playoffs, round 1, and upset somebody good. You're like, whoa. Get that quarterfinal game in round 2 and upset somebody else. You're like, uh-oh. And then they're going to go into the semifinals to get rolled because something the other team's coach will like bait him into a pissing match, and like, there's coaches that know how to play him. And that's my concern with Ole Miss. Talent-wise, Shaun, you're right. Scheme-wise, you're right. Like, nothing you said is wrong if they can mature, spot on. It's just when you got a 50-year-old head coach, that's not usually when guys figure it out. You just kind of are who you are at that point in time. Like me, I'm 47. Like, well, why don't you try guys, I am who I am. Accept it. You know what I mean? Like, this is my personality. And I just don't think and that's why I also don't have South Carolina on my list. Now, one difference between South Carolina and Shane Beamer and Lane Kiffin is Shane Beamer's not a spring chicken. That dude's 48 years old. Like, he's older than I am. But he's only been a head football coach for a few years. He's going into, year 5 at South Carolina. So there's a little bit more room for him to mature. And that's why South Carolina is a team, I think, Shaun, you can – there's 2 reasons why I think South Carolina might be a dark horse for me. They can match a lot of people athlete for athlete. And they've got a quarterback that's sort of I can put a team on my shoulders and go do something, like Riley Leonard. They have the best option to have this year's Riley Leonard on their football team. That guy that just kind of elevates and like, it may not always be pretty. And I'd argue that he was a better passer last year at times than what Riley was. But they've got that elevator at quarterback, and he's got enough athletes around him. I just don't know if they're good enough in the trenches, especially on offense, to me. And then Shane Beamer's another guy. Your team has those moments because you're not mature enough to say, I'm not going to lose my you-know-what on the sidelines of a football game because a call didn't go my way like he did against Notre Dame in 2022. I'm not going to let a coach bait me into an argument and make me look, like Jack Nicholson at the end of A Few Good Men. I'm going to rip off your head and down your throat. Like that's basically what I hear Shane Beamer saying when he was trying to go after Brett Bielema. Like, first of all, Brett Bielema will wear you out, first of all, okay? But second of all, grow up, dude. You wonder why your football team acts immature and makes those mistakes? Because you act that way. I've talked to people that have been at their practices. They practice chaotically. He's got to grow up as a coach, and I don't think he will. But the talent is there, and I think he's at least young enough to where there's at least maybe some hope. Young enough from an experience standpoint that there's at least some hope that he can grow up. But he's their biggest drawback. Shane Beamer's their biggest question mark for me. I don't have Oklahoma on this list. They're simply not talented enough, because I think a lot of people in the chat are confusing team capable of sneaking into the playoff for a team that's capable of winning it all. And being a dark horse to get into the playoff does not make – not everybody that makes the playoff is a title contender. Because not everybody that makes the playoff is – Indiana had no hope of winning 4 games last year. Tennessee had no hope of winning 4 games last year. Boise State had no hope of winning 3. Arizona State had no hope of winning 3. Indiana had no hope of winning 4 games last year. It's SMU had no hope of winning 4 games last year. These are teams that can win it all. And here's a team that is my final dark horse of the SEC. LSU. And I'll tell you why. I think they've got a quarterback that, when he's on, can light you up. I think that their receiving core gets too much hype, but if you take away the hype and you just look at what it is, it's pretty good. They've got a really talented young running back in Caden Durham. They've got depth at running back. This is their most talented defense they've had in years. This is the most talented defense they've had of the Brian Kelly era on all 3 levels. I like the job that Bryce Baker's done as their defensive coordinator. And they, like I say again, their secondary, did they get too much hype? Yes. But take away the hype and just look at how are they stack up against last year and the year before secondary. It's certainly improved. The big question for Blake Baker, I keep saying Bryce Baker. I don't know why. Blake Baker. The reason that I have my big concern, I have 2 big concerns with LSU. Number one is Brian Kelly. I have a hard time going from winning no big games to 3 or 4. Just be honest. I'm not trying to throw shade. That's just reality. When has Brian Kelly ever won on this stage? Never. So he's got to prove that he can. But you're always that guy until you prove it, right? But the offensive line is a major question mark for me. It wasn't that good last year, and they lost 4 starters, including the number 4 overall pick. But if their offensive line can just be solid, get a body on a body, that just be a solid body on a body offensive line, this team can score some points, and I think their defense is going to be improved. So I do think you have to put them in that category of dark horse team. It's just because, like you say, well, what about their head coach? Hey, there's a lot of teams on this list that have head coaches that haven't proven they can win on the stage. I think Ryan Day had not proven he could win on the stage until last year. I mean, what was Ryan Day's claim to fame prior to this? They almost won a couple semifinal games. I mean, the only semifinal game he ever won was the COVID year. And I've told you, I throw a lot out with the COVID year. Like, he lost in 19, right? Had the COVID year in 2020. 21, they didn't make it in. 22, they made it in, got beat. Yeah, but it was really close. They still got beat. Didn't make it in 23. Didn't make it in, and then 24, you finally went. So until last year, Ryan Day was that guy that hadn't proven he could win on that stage. And then until he did. So, I think you can't just eliminate a team just because their coach has yet to prove he can be that guy. You have to look at the entirety of it. But that's also what makes him a dark horse. Because if Brian Kelly had proven he can win on the stage, they're not a dark horse. They're just a contender. If they can just fix the offensive line, this team's going to be pretty good. And that to me is why I think you have to, in my opinion, I have to at least put them in the dark horse category.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I know teams like Missouri, Florida are teams that, people love to talk about. Florida got hot at the end of the year. Missouri, drink what he's done. Can they improve upon the disappointment of last year, right? Because they were viewed as one of those teams that might be able to get in and make a run. Win a couple of games in the playoffs as the season started last year. And then it was the offense that really sputtered. You didn't expect that with the talent they had at wide receiver and the quarterback coming back. So South Carolina, I'm just not as I agree with everything you said.
What's your hold up on them, Shaun? What's your hold up?
They have the same effect as Ole Miss. It's always going to be that one head scratcher.
Yep.
Every year. Is that one talent is never the issue. Talent's never the issue. They'll turn around, they'll beat Clemson at the end of a year, and then turn around the next year. Last year, they had Alabama on the ropes at Alabama. Should have won that game. Should have beaten LSU by double digits. They were in full control of that game. The refs helped a little bit with some bad calls, but They gave the game away. It is like, yes, you have everything you need, but you find a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. You just snatch it and pull it. And I can't put my trust in them quite yet as a program. I agree with everything you said about Lenore Sellers.
I agree with you.
He has, the ability he has, what they have athletically to be able to hang with everybody that's at that level.
Mm-hmm.
But you talk about, like, dude, Bielema literally walked across the field. I don't know what he said, how he baited, and from that point on, the team
lost his mind.
Lost his mind.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you doing?
Same thing happened against Notre Dame. I don't know if they showed it on TV, but like he lost it on a penalty that was not called on his sideline.
Yeah.
I mean, like lost it. Like I thought he was going to punch the ref in the face. And like then you wonder why your team plays the way that they do.
And Bielema was walking back to his sideline just smirking and laughing.
And his team's loving it.
Just laughing.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, man, I have to see it. I have to see it. Which goes back to our conversation. That's why, as much as you talk about talent, man, having the right guy to infuse character, that no matter what happens, guys, let's stay locked in to what we're here to do. And see, when you see guys on the sideline throwing fits and temper tantrums, I mean, Nick Saban's thrown a temper tantrum before. All coaches throw temper tantrums. We seen Marcus last year. That call against Jack Kaiser against Penn State, Marcus, he caught himself though.
It's you like, again. Okay. He's like, it's you again, because he had made some bad calls against them before.
Yeah, but you have to have that ability to catch yourself and say, okay, that was a moment. Now we're back to winning this football game.
Yep.
Right? Or handling success and saying, yeah, we beat Georgia. That's fine. I'll give you a night to celebrate, but we're back to work.
Yep.
We're back to work tomorrow.
Why? Because we got one more guarantee.
Got one more game. And it goes back to what players, Lou Holtz, they would say, he would coach us harder the week of Navy and Army than when we were facing Miami and Michigan. Why? He was creating a culture of consistency. No. We're not playing the schedule. We're playing us. I'm not coaching this schedule. I'm not going to coach you harder just because it's Miami or Michigan. No. I'm coaching you just as hard for the other teams that we're favored to beat by 4 touchdowns. So that no matter what, when you come to practice, you got an expectation. This is about to be hard work, and Saturday is going to be easier than what we just went through. So that you just talked about what you've heard about practices being chaotic. No, you're not winning big games like that because you don't have the consistency leading into the big games. No.
Final team. There's one team outside the Power Four that is a legit title contender, and that's Notre Dame, which is an obvious one. I mean, they were there last year, bring back the majority of their coaching staff. The biggest new addition they made, the 2 new additions they made, one guy was the running backs coach on a team that went to the semifinals. The other guy is a defensive coordinator team that's won a championship in the playoff era. It was the first playoff of the playoff era, but you've got your head coach back. You've got your offensive coordinator back. Your team goes into year 2. You bring back a lot of talent. You're deep. You're athletic. You look at them and you put Ohio State, you put Penn State, Bama, Texas, Clemson, Georgia. There's that group of the teams that I think have the best shot to win it. Notre Dame certainly in if not at the top of that list, and meaning at the top, meaning that top group of 2 or 3 teams that have a shot to win it. So it's for Notre Dame. It's going to come down to, is their quarterback as good as we think he is, and can the team stay hungry? I think that's really what it comes down to. Can you build on what they showed last year, where we don't need external motivation anymore. We finally learned what it means to, and you were talking about it with Lou Holtz, talking about South Carolina, Shaun, but look, we're going out preparing this week to play Notre Dame football. I don't care who we play. It doesn't matter. We're going to play Notre Dame football. There's a standard we've set for ourselves that we have to live up to, regardless of who the opponent is. And I think if they can answer that question, then I think they're a favorite to get back to the title game this season. they're in that group of 3 or 4 teams that have the best shot to get to the title game. So that's why Notre Dame is the final team on my list. So there you are, Shaun. Anybody else from the non-group of Power 4 that you would throw in there besides Notre Dame? Or you want to add a little bit on to the Notre Dame conversation before we get out of here? We do have a couple super chats I want to get to, but anything else to get to for that?
No, great show today.
Yeah, it was
great
fun.
Chat.
It was very
everybody.
Fun.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Shaun, before we get out of here, we do have a couple super chats to get to here. Beefeater ND08 says, my weekly fare for a ride on the Petty train, choo-choo. Thank you for that, Beefeater. Patrick Gaselli says, IB team, I'm a little late today, so you may have covered this, but apologies if that's the case. On the Intel O-line report, didn't see Tarek or Otting in them. Are they still battling? Had high hopes for both of them. Much love. First of all, Patrick, I appreciate the super chat very, very much. Number one. Number two, those are Intel things only for the message board. So if you have a question about it, ask it on the message board. I'm not going to talk about it out loud. But with the one thing I will say about Tarek is he's coming back from 2 injuries. He had 2 injuries in the spring, shoulder and a foot, I think. So he's still working back to health. So not a lot to report there other than just working back to health. And then with Joe Otting, I can't possibly get intel on everybody. That's real intel other than he's working hard. So anyone that's not on there, it's not that it's bad. If I got bad intel, meaning somebody's not doing well, I'd put it in there. So if it's not in there, it's just because I didn't get enough. And I don't view talking to one source who said, oh, he's working hard, he looks good. That's not intel. That's like I could make a blanket statement like you're a scholarship player at Notre Dame. Yeah, okay, you're working hard and you look good. Yeah, that's called the summer. You know what I mean? Like this is trying to go more beyond that. So while I greatly appreciate the super chat, those intel pieces are kept on the board for a reason. So I do appreciate the super chat very, very much. But that's the reason you didn't hear about Tarek, and that's the reason I don't have everybody discuss. Like I don't have an intel piece on Jeremiah Love. I won't have one on him. Well, why? Because I only get a limited opportunity to talk to people. I'm not wasting them on talking about Jeremiah Love and Jadari Price. I already know. You know what I mean? Like I already know. So I want to find out more about Keidron Young, who I have intel on. I want to find out more about, I don't need to spend 5 hours talking about Jaden Greathouse. I kind of know. I want to find out how's Cam Williams doing, how's Micah Gilbert doing. Like those are the ones I think are more intriguing than the kind of the knowns. But I have limited time and limited opportunities. I can't possibly get intel on all 85, 90 plus scholarship guys, plus walk-ons who they like a lot. And then the last one from Raymond Hart. And love these college football parts of these Monday shows. IB Raymond, we enjoy doing them. I mean, that's part of the reason we included it in it, because Shaun and I love talking about college football as a whole. And we thought that it would be good to do because we think that if you really want to understand where Notre Dame ranks among the nation's best teams, you have to have some knowledge of the nation's best teams. And we think that makes it for a far more fun conversation. So I appreciate all those super chats. Shaun, I appreciate you for a great show today, man. That was a great idea. That team topic was a great idea. And we're going to have some more coming up. So we'll be back. Let me see real quick. Let me look at the practice schedule to find out if we're going to be back next Monday. I forget if Notre Dame has a practice on Monday. So let me just pull that up here real quick. And Monday, nope, we do not have practice availability on next Monday. So we will be back next Monday with some fun RTCF topics. But before we do leave here, folks, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. If you don't mind, we would love it on your podcast platform. If you could go to your favorite podcast platform, be Apple or Spotify or whatever else, leave us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate that very, very much. It certainly helps us continue to spread, what we're kind of do here. And of course, if you want to support Irish Breakdown even further than just with your time, which we greatly appreciate, you can go to the boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com, sign up for our message board. With a lot of great stuff on there. I've had 3 intel pieces drop. I got 2 more planned. I'll drop 1 tonight, drop 1 tomorrow. They were so big, Shaun, that I just was like, I don't want to put all these in like 1 or 2 because then a lot of stuff's going to get lost. So I was like, let me just break them up a little bit. So I've got the offensive ones all done. I got a couple defensive ones I'm going to get out here in the next couple days as well. So be on the lookout for that. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow with Trev. We're going to have some Notre Dame topics to discuss tomorrow. Maybe some more college football topics to discuss tomorrow. This next month's going to be fun. We're going to do conference predictions. We're going to do preseason All-America teams. We're going to do a a final preseason top 25. It's going to be a lot of fun. Shaun and I are going to have a top Heisman contenders RTCF segment coming up here very soon as well. So a lot of really cool stuff still to discuss here this summer. Even because, again, we don't get a ton of access. We get one full practice and I think 5 other partial practices. So we're not going to get to see a lot of that. So we're going to do a lot of our previews and all that stuff during fall camp as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But Thursday, we will get back from practice and we will have a show. So be ready for that as well. For Shaun, I'm Bryan. Have an awesome rest of your day, folks. We'll talk to you again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.